Greetings to see you. I have just finished work. This will be the first time that I've seen day 5 of testimony for Chloe, the prosecution of Chloe Driver. Chloe is accused of murdering her 14-month-old, 13-month-old baby 4 years ago. And so she is pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. And so I thought, well, I'm going to watch this anyway. I have not yet seen today's testimony. And so I'd welcome you if you would like to stay and watch it with me. It's probably not going to be a lot of commentary because I myself haven't watched it yet. But hey, DB, good to see you. So I think I'm just going to watch it, and I'll probably stop occasionally and make little comments, but and I'd welcome any kind of chatter that you guys have. So if something comes up, you have an observation or a thought about what the testimony that we're hearing, I would be very interested to know about it. So let's go up to 1.25 to try to get through this a little bit faster. And so that's what we're doing. And again, I welcome you if you want to stay and watch with me. And if you want to go find some more like dialogue, chat, I certainly understand. All right, here we go. Oh, I think Renee Driver, I think this is Chloe's mom that we're about to listen to.
Your next witness, please.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense will call Renee Driver to the stand.
Renee. This should be very interesting. Hi, Kelly O. How are you? Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Should be interesting, right? She does look a bit nervous. Did y'all watch this today, or will this be the first time to see it? The case is so sad. Kathy, this is probably one of the most devastating cases that I've watched. Truly. That's her mom. First time seeing it. Okay. Same with Hey, Diane. Yeah, there's something about kids and their moms, right? The minute we see our moms, we just start crying. So I'm so sad.
Information testimony about to give this court will be the truth, the whole truth.
Hi, Angelique. Good to see you.
Okay, you can put your hand down. Can you tell the jury who you are?
Renee Driver.
Okay, and where do you currently live? City and state is fine.
Florida.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
I'm a server.
Okay, all right. And how do you know Chloe?
She's my daughter.
Okay, how many children do you have?
3.
Okay, is she the oldest, youngest? Where does she fall in line?
Youngest.
Okay.
Oh, this is hard to watch.
It's hard for you to be here today. And if you need a break or a moment, just let me know, okay?
So hard to watch.
Tell us about Chloe as a child.
She was a beautiful little girl. She was a Spitfire.
Okay. And what do you mean by Spitfire?
She was very.
Hi, Terry.
She knew everything. She was smarter than everybody, and in her family.
And that was primarily when she was a teenager?
Yes. She did gymnastics when she was a little girl, and she had friends, and she played baseball in junior high school, I believe, or softball. But as she got older, she just knew everything.
Okay. Were you close with your daughter while she was growing up?
I thought I was.
Okay. Have you learned a lot of information since this case started that
Yes.
made you reevaluate that position?
Yes.
Okay. When she was a teenager, I know you said she was headstrong. Your family moved around a lot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that kind of created a little bit of a level of upheaval with Chloe? in terms of relationships with people and friends?
I didn't think it was.
Okay.
Um,
When she was a teenager, did you notice any signs or concerns about her mood or possible mental illness when she was a child?
there were a lot of different things. She was very headstrong, and I just thought she was going to be a strong little girl. And then as she got older, um, she put me through some stuff.
Okay.
There were times where she put me through hell.
Okay. And a lot of that was kind of based on teenagers who know better than their
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
Wasn't her out committing crimes or anything like
Oh,
that?
no, no,
Was
no,
she
no, no.
Definitely thought she was all-knowing or anything like that. Were you aware when she was a child of whether or not she had attempted to commit suicide?
When she was a child?
Well, as a teenager.
No.
Okay. Did you subsequently learn about some behavioral issues related to that after this case started, with cutting or anything like that?
She was cutting her wrist, but I never knew it because she always wore those plastic bracelets and it covered it. And I never had any idea that she was going through that.
Communicated any of that to you at all? Okay. When she ultimately left your house, that was when she was 17 years old?
I believe so,
And tell me what your thought process was about why you let her go.
because I couldn't handle the way she was going about it.
Hi, Justice Jane. Welcome.
My middle and my younger siblings, I think, learned from their older one. My oldest son badgered me, and he would do it all day, every day until he got what he wanted. And my husband always worked out of state. I was Monday through Friday, only parent, working and having 3 children. And when there's just a time where I gave into him. Well, then it started becoming a habit. And I think Chloe got some of those habits maybe from him, watching him get what he wanted as she was growing up. She was never a materialistic kid. When she wanted to leave, and she just asked and asked, and it wasn't just asking, it was arguing, it was fighting, it was, I just finally gave in. On top of that, my husband ended up with a quadruple bypass. He was out of work for a couple of years. So, I mean, I had my own issues to deal with. On top of that, I had
Wow.
children to deal with that.
Mom is dealing with a lot of guilt. Yeah. What do you guys think? Does she sound like she's got a lot of guilt? Hey, Desired. Good to see you. Welcome. Everybody say hi to Terry F. This is her first time to be here. Sounds like a lot of guilt, right? That's a little uncomfortable.
We're very headstrong.
And when she left your house, how would
Maybe
you describe
regret.
the
Yes,
communication
stepping
you had
on.
with Chloe?
Yeah.
Was it here and there? Was it constant
It was here and there when she left.
when she left? Okay. And was that usually via text or phone, or do you recall?
Probably both.
Okay. When did you first find out that she was involved with Mr. Ben Michael?
18, maybe.
2018, or when she was
No,
a-
when she, well, yeah, that would be 2018 also, yes.
Okay. And how did you find out about that?
She came home and I found out she was pregnant, I believe.
And was that the first time you found out about the age difference between the two of them?
Yes, I had no idea. I didn't know about him. I didn't know about his age. I knew nothing.
You knew nothing. She hadn't told you about any of that.
Not
Okay.
one thing.
And what was your reaction to finding out his age?
I said I never wanted to meet him. I never wanted him around the house. She was welcome to stay and with her baby, but I wanted nothing to do with him.
Okay. And then ultimately, she had the baby, but continued to stay with him, correct?
Yes.
At any point in time, did you have any concerns about their relationship prior to the birth of Hannah?
Well, it was all just a big shock. I did what I could to try to get her to stay with me, but it didn't work.
Okay. And so then ultimately Hannah was born. When was the first time you got to meet Hannah?
January of 2019.
Okay. And then what kind of situation was that? Did they bring her to you?
Yes.
Okay. And when you observed Chloe with Hannah, what did you observe about her care and demeanor with her
She
daughter?
was a very good mother and she loved her daughter.
Never saw any concerns of,
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at that time.
as far as from what you could see, did you feel that she was the primary caregiver of that child?
Yes.
And then after the birth of Hannah, how would you describe the level of contact you had with Chloe at that time? Was it,
It was minimal.
did you initiate contact with her trying
A
to?
lot.
Okay. And what was the response to that contact?
Honestly, I don't remember. It wasn't as much as I would have liked.
Okay. And then Hannah was born in October of 2019. And then you met her in January.
Oh, so I met her in 2020. I'm sorry, January 2020.
January 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So the first time you met her was January 2020, and that was at your house?
Yes,
Okay. And then when do you recall the next time you saw her?
April of 2020.
2020. And each one of these times that Chloe would bring her to you, you didn't observe anything concerning about the care of Hannah?
No,
Did you ever observe any signs of mental illness or anything at that point with your daughter?
no, other than me just not being able to understand how she would have gotten involved with somebody that was so much older than her.
Okay. You struggled with that?
Yes.
Okay. When was the first time you really found out anything about the true nature of their relationship?
It's really terrible case. I'll
I
be
don't
sweet
believe
to
I
you.
met him in January of 2020, or I don't believe he was there. Probably July of 2020.
Okay. And can you share what those concerns were?
So I got to
Welcome,
see
Crystal.
how much weight Chloe had lost. I could see her in July. She was at my house for a couple weeks. Just everything, a lot of had just changed. She was mumbling. She was, nothing really changed with Hannah, just her. She was just falling apart. I mean, she literally was just falling apart. But at the same time, at that time, I wasn't so much paying attention to her because I had Hannah too, and I was just so excited every time I got to see Hannah.
Is that the time that involved going to the river with them?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so, yes.
And then when was the next time that you saw Hannah? Do you recall?
After the incident in November.
Okay. All right. So let's jump forward to Thanksgiving of 2020. Okay. Well, before I do that, may I approach the witness? Yes. All right. I'm going to show you what's marked as defense 18. Can you recognize that picture?
Yes.
Okay. Can you
I
tell
mean,
us
it's
about
pretty
what
pretty
age
clear.
was at that particular, I'll move to the defense 18.
It's pretty clear that these symptoms showed up. They were part of the postpartum process, right? She should have been being treated for postpartum depression, but these grown men, these old men that she was with, they didn't even let her have the baby at the hospital. The baby didn't have a birth certificate, nothing. So she didn't get proper care. She needed to have been treated for postpartum depression, in my opinion.
18. No objection.
It's admitted.
Judge, would you please turn on the overhead so I can publish? Thank you.
Are you doing the
Uh,
document camera or are you doing?
Okay, it should be on the computer. If you just give me 1 second. Yeah. I'll skip that one for right now.
Okay, sorry that it's, I'm not letting you do what needs to be done.
Thank you.
I mean, if my young daughter came home after having a baby and she's sitting around mumbling, blank face, we're going to the emergency room.
All right. So let's jump forward to Thanksgiving of 2020. Okay.
Okay.
And where were you at that time? Where were you living?
Knoxville.
Okay. And you lived with your husband in Knoxville at that time?
I did.
Okay. And tell us what happened on November 26th of 2020.
Was that Thanksgiving Day?
Yes, ma'am.
I received some alarming texts from Chloe, which I woke my husband up and I said that we need to go to Asheville.
Okay. And based on those texts, what did you and your husband immediately do?
Got dressed and went to Asheville.
Okay. And about how far away is that for you guys?
Maybe 2 hours. I don't remember.
Okay. What do you remember about what time of day you arrived there?
I believe we left around 11, so I'm going to say around 1:30.
Okay. But you were concerned enough by the information you had received from Chloe at that time that you immediately dropped what
Yes.
you were doing and got in the car.
Yes.
Okay. And what happened when you arrived in Asheville?
Chloe was there. She was distraught. She was crying. She was very upset because Brian had taken off with Hannah.
Okay. So when you got
Oh
there,
my
Hannah was not
God.
there.
Hannah was not there.
Did you know where Hannah was at that point in time?
No idea.
Okay. And what did you do next?
I believe we called the police.
Okay. And then after calling the police, what did you all decide to do?
After everything was all settled and done with, we ended up leaving Asheville without Hannah, and when we brought Chloe
Back to your house in
back,
Knoxville?
yes,
Okay. And when you got back to Knoxville, is that the first time you kind of became aware of everything that had been going on?
yes,
Okay. Is the first time you learned that?
it started trickling in.
Okay. First time you learned anything about Hannah not having a birth certificate or pediatric care?
That is correct.
Okay. And what steps did you take from there?
On Friday after Thanksgiving, I went straight to Knoxville Police Department to see if there was anything we could do. There was absolutely nothing we could do. Since it didn't happen in Tennessee, where I lived. Then I started looking on the internet and making phone calls about getting Hannah a birth certificate. I talked to Brian's mother. She gave me a phone number on Saturday. I called the phone number that she gave me that was for the FBI. I called Memorial Hospital that was in Miami, Florida. And I just wanted to get some kind of ball rolling on getting her a birth certificate. And I will tell you, I did have to lie about that to Chloe because she was adamant of not, she did not want Hannah to have a birth certificate because Brian was ordering her not to, and to make sure that I didn't get involved in getting a birth certificate.
Okay. So you were,
But we were doing it behind her back.
okay, but you were trying to, at the same time, you were also trying to kind of fix those things that the Asheville Police Department and Knoxville Police Department had all
Yes.
told you.
I was assuming that there could have been an Amber Alert out for her. That's all I wanted was Hannah back. But evidently I was wrong. They weren't able to do anything like that.
Okay. And at that point, it's because there had been no birth certificate or determination of parentage?
Yes. And also because Hannah was Brian's daughter, all they had to do was a blood test, which means they didn't find her in danger, so they couldn't move on.
All right. So at that particular point in time, you learned more about the relationship in those 48, 72 hours than you had the entire 2.5
Absolutely.
years beforehand.
Absolutely.
When you picked up your daughter in Asheville, do you recall seeing any physical marks on her that you were concerned about?
At that time, I believe she had a black eye, and I also believe the police took pictures of her back because she had been dragged or thrown on the ground, and there were marks on her back.
So when you went to pick her up that day, you recall her having that black eye.
Yes.
Without telling us what she said, did you ask her about that black eye? Do you recall?
Yes.
And then, so in response to all of these things that you were learning in this short period of time, were you trying to help Chloe and Hannah formulate a plan?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that was reflected in the steps you took.
So I guess old Jason Spillers was a liar when he talked about how cute and sweet things were for Chloe and Z. Right? And if he would lie about that, then can we believe any of his testimony?
to try to get the birth certificate or other things?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Did you get any indication at that point in time? Well, I'll move on. So during that period of time, Chloe, did you have any contact with Mr. Ben Michael when Hannah was gone?
Yes.
Okay. And did he say some pretty concerning things to you at that time without saying what he said? Were there things that were said that concerned you?
On Thanksgiving evening, yes.
Okay. And that just again contributed to you trying to figure out what to do next, correct?
Yes, I exploded.
All right. And you had never really ever had to deal with anything like this beforehand, correct?
No.
Okay. Was Hannah your only grandchild?
Yes.
And then ultimately, Chloe had been communicating with Mr. Ben Michael, correct? To try to get back to Hannah.
Yes.
Okay. And was she, during that time that she was separated, what was her demeanor?
Just lost, confused.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, she
was-
wasn't,
She was hopeless.
she was hopeless?
Yes.
All right. Do you recall, Chloe, well, let me rephrase that.
It's
You took a
devastating,
video of
Kim.
Chloe on November 27th.
It's
Do you recall
really
that?
I
the
do.
worst.
What?
I think I need
December
to
7th.
shut this down and restart.
Okay.
Try to get back to work. So
Thank
Justice Jane, that's so funny. I mean, it's not funny, it's devastating, but couldn't happen to a nicer guy, right? That's a great name for old Jason Spillers. Oh, that she's just, it's so sad to look at her, and it's just so tragic, so much lost. And you got the two grown men who really ought to be culpable on some level. Truly. This is just, this woman needed help. So sad.
All right, you can.
Absolutely,
I'm sorry,
Kelly.
everything-
Yes.
I pushed everything in there. So you're trying to publish a document, or you're still?
Published in the video.
Okay.
And
It says lectern input. It says live to displays.
Is the HDMI cord plugged in?
Here,
Ready? Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense 7. Okay. I'm just going to have you watch this video. Okay.
My name is Ruby Driver. It's 11/27/2020. I'm being forced to get into a truck with Binyam and Kyle or Brian Joyce to see my daughter again because he has kept her away from me. I do not know where she is, and he won't tell me anything. He's kept her with people that I don't really know well, and I don't know what's going on with her. And I'm being forced to get in the car and go with him to be able to see her. And I don't even know if I'm actually going straight to her, but I'm doing whatever I think I can to get to her. Your name is Hannah Nicole Driver.
All right.
Wow.
You took that video, correct? All right. Tell us why you took that video.
Oh my God.
Because I was going to send it to the police officer in North Carolina
Were you
to see if he could help. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to go about getting help, even though I lived where I lived. And she was taken from Asheville, so I was going to take that video and send it to the officer in Asheville to help us because he was a very nice person.
Oh my
And he said he
God.
would help us in any way he could. So,
were
This
you
is
concerned about the safety of
devastating.
your daughter and your granddaughter at that time?
absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Ultimately, Chloe left your residence after being there a couple days, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall when your next communication was from her?
I don't know, all these time periods are getting messed up in my head. There was a time where she came back for a day or two.
Hi,
and then-
June.
I guess was somewhere in Knoxville, I don't know where. And I believe they picked her up to go back to Asheville to look at some property.
Okay. What was her demeanor or when she was with you over Thanksgiving and the time thereafter? Can you describe like her affect or what you noticed about her?
she was a mess because Hannah wasn't there, but she was relieved because she was at home. At least that's what I thought. That's what I saw.
Did she appear tired or distressed or?
So she always appeared tired. She always appeared hungry.
Okay. And then you also, I think, indicated that she was acting kind of strangely in terms of mumbling or like.
And I started noticing that in July
Mhm.
when she was at my house for a couple of weeks.
Okay. Did you see it again in November? Do you recall?
I honestly don't recall. I don't know.
All right. If you would have told an evaluator in this case that that's something that you talked to, you have no reason to dispute that, though, correct?
Absolutely not.
And I think you already indicated that you're having a lot of issues with the memories.
Absolutely.
Okay. When this has been a pretty traumatic and stressful event for you
Yes.
and your family, correct? Okay. So she came back to you with Hannah at some point in time, correct? After?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to show you what is marked. Defense 19 and 20. May I first witness?
Yes.
All right, if you will just take a look at these two pictures for me. All right. Do I need to admit those? Okay. You're admitted. May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
This woman needed help, y'all. She loved her baby.
All right, so this is a picture that was, I'm trying.
Oh, that's the great and glorious Oz, right? This is Z. Z, the one who is equal in intellectual stature to Jason the pea sipper. He looks like a real peach, doesn't he? Creepy bastard. Look, but also look at Chloe in this picture. Look at her face. She looks like she's on the verge of crying. Wow, this is so sad. Ugh, sickening. Just sickening.
Not my computer. There we go. All right.
Yeah, desired.
These were pictures, and that's your residence there, correct? In the
Yes.
background? All
It
right.
is.
And that this was in after Thanksgiving of 2020, correct?
She should have been in a hospital.
At the beginning of December, I believe.
Okay. And do you know who took these pictures?
I did.
You took those pictures? Okay. And that this is an accurate representation of what Chloe looked like
Yes.
at the end of November 2020? Okay. Looking back on these pictures, do they cause you some level of distress?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I didn't see it at the time. All I saw was Hannah. So
So this picture was taken the end of November, which is just weeks before the murder. This guy looks like a devil. He looks evil. Golly. This is just weeks before the murder. It is so clear to see that she is not well. Wow.
Okay. And that this is an accurate representation of what Chloe looked like
yes.
at the end of November 2020? Okay. Looking back on these pictures, do they cause you some level of distress?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I didn't see it at the time. All I saw was Hannah. So
And you also took this picture as well, correct?
yes.
All right. What were you trying to do? What were you and your husband trying?
So pretty. Look how pretty Chloe is. Wow. And he is just, nauseating. This is so hard to believe.
What were you trying to do? What were you and your husband trying to do during this time after Chloe left with Hannah and went back with Mr. Ben Michael?
We were just trying to get her and Hannah to stay with us.
And how were you doing that? Do you recall?
Just, my husband actually told her that somewhere down the line that if she came home, he would pay for her to go to school and buy her a car. And she did not like that. She said that it would have to be her choice if she decided to come home and do home.
Did you feel at that point in time that she felt like she could leave that relationship?
No,
Or that she left that relationship, she had concerns about whether or not she'd be able to leave with Hannah?
she wouldn't be able to leave with Hannah.
I don't know, Kelly.
That's what I did.
Okay, all right. And what other things did you and your husband do between Thanksgiving and December 8th of 2020 to try to convince Chloe to leave?
So she left right around those pictures, and I didn't see her again until December 7th, I don't believe.
Okay.
December 7th, she came to my house to pick up Hannah's stuff because they were heading to Florida. And I asked her to please stay with us. And she was worried. She was like, she said that Brian would never let her just would never allow her to stay with Hannah. And I tried to tell her, don't worry about Brian and Jason or whoever's here. Well, we can take care of this. I will call the police and I will
Whoa.
have them remove you from
Notice.
property.
Notice she invoked Jason's name. She said, don't worry about him or Jason or whoever's here. Wow, these two men, they need charges. I'm sorry, they do.
Well, you don't understand that. He'll never let us stay.
The way she acted when she was at your house, was that different than you had ever previously seen her since you,
Yes.
I mean, you previously described her as a spitfire and talkative and
No,
everything.
at this point, she was, I hate to say it, but she was just drained and dead inside. She was like a zombie. She was just, she wasn't her. She wasn't Chloe.
Okay. Both physically and mentally or emotionally?
Yes,
Okay.
all of it.
Did you notice when she came back to your home on the 7th, whether or not she still had, or whether she had more bruises or anything on her face? Do you recall?
I do. Actually, December 7th, I asked her how she got the black eye, and she said she ran into a cabinet. I said, no, you didn't.
But she didn't
And
give
she
you
said, Mom, I deserved it. And it's-
So let's talk about looking back at all of this now, okay? You obviously lost your daughter and granddaughter, correct?
yes.
All right, and you found out on December the 8th about what had happened, correct?
Technically, I didn't find out until December 9th in the morning.
Okay, and that was from the Canton Police Department?
Yes.
Okay, and you and your husband immediately started providing information to law enforcement at that time, correct?
I believe so.
But
That
you
was a
had,
hard phone call, so I really don't remember. what it was.
understandable. Did at any point in time, did you ever, based on what you saw with Chloe, ever think that she would harm Hannah?
Absolutely not.
Did you have any concerns that she would ever harm herself?
I didn't think about it at the time. But now that I look back at so much and remember things, possibly, yes.
So this, when you got that phone call from Canton Police, you were floored, correct?
Yes, I lost my daughter and my granddaughter.
Can
Well,
I
I
have a
did lose my granddaughter.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor? Questions at this time. Ms. Roper's going to ask you some questions, okay?
Good morning. Ms. Driver, I want to go through, you indicated that we saw those pictures that after the incident where she came to your house and you made that video, her and Hannah both returned to your house and stayed with you for a couple of days, correct?
After the video,
Mhm.
she was gone for probably a week or so.
Do you
I
recall talking to
maybe-
Detective Cruz during this investigation with your husband?
December 11th, we went to Canton Police.
Okay. And do you recall telling her that Brian dropped off Hannah and Chloe at your house the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend? And they
No.
stayed for a couple of days.
I don't know. All the dates are mixed up in my head.
Okay.
I don't know when they came back.
Okay. But did her and Hannah come stay with you?
Yes, after the video?
After the video?
Yes.
Okay.
I just don't know if it was when exactly it was.
Okay. And then you said that she was leaving with him because they were going to go look at some property in Knoxville?
Yes.
All right.
In Asheville.
In Asheville. Okay. Thank you. And when you were interviewed by Detective Cruz, did you tell her that you and your husband didn't know that anything was going on until about Thanksgiving time?
That is, yes.
Is that accurate?
For the most part, yes.
And did you tell her that at that time your concerns became your goal of getting Hannah away from both of them because you didn't want Hannah to be raised in a cult?
That is correct too.
Okay. So your decision to try to get her a birth certificate and go behind Chloe's back in that regard is because you wanted Chloe to go to school, to get vaccines, to have medical care, and Chloe and Brian would not agree with that.
Yes, yes.
And you had repeatedly tried to get Chloe to leave that situation and she refused, correct?
She didn't refuse. She wanted to, but there was no way out
Okay. And
in her mind.
all right. You're aware that after she killed Hannah, she continued to reach out to
Yes.
Brian and maintain a relationship with him, right?
I know that she kept in touch with him. He had a hold on her to where she had to.
Okay.
I don't understand it myself. I really don't.
All right. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of your statement that she had to. Do you understand that when she was reaching out to him, he could not access her physically and he could not call her
At the hospital?
after
Or
she
in
was
jail?
arrested?
Yeah, I know that she could only make the calls out.
Okay.
Hi,
And are you aware
Linda.
of
Good
how
to
often
see
she
you.
Chose to do that?
I know that, honestly, no, I don't.
Okay. Did you know that for over 2 years after she killed Hannah, she continued to call him?
Yes,
Okay. Are you aware that she
Welcome,
made over
Christine. Good to have you.
600, no, I was not.
Do you know just how many times she lied to you and told you she was no longer talking to him when she in fact was?
And I made it clear to her if she kept talking to him, that I would have nothing to do with her.
Okay. And are you aware after you made those statements to her and behind your
I
back?
believe so. I believe she told me.
Okay. Do you recall a conversation that you had with her after her arrest where she told you that she wished we would have asked her permission to give Hannah an autopsy because her and Brian would have never agreed to that?
I don't know anything about that.
Okay. You don't remember having an argument with her about that's what happens when you kill a baby, that they have to have an autopsy?
With Chloe?
Right. Do you remember having that conversation with her?
No.
You don't remember that? Okay. Do you recall telling Detective Cruz when you spoke to her that Chloe went into this situation with strength from her upbringing and she was able to wane through it, but the last few months when he teamed up with Jason, that's when she lost hope?
I really don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. You've told this jury that you didn't become aware that there were any issues until the last couple of months, right?
I
Mhm.
feel
You're aware that's when Jason really
strongly
joined the
that
picture?
Jason was somehow
I have not been
involved.
keeping up with Jason. I don't know.
Okay.
I know that he was at the river, but he was only at the river for a few minutes.
Okay. So you don't.
After that, I know nothing about this cult. I know nothing about these people. I only know about Chloe and Brian and maybe a little bit about the two girls. That's it. I didn't go into their life.
Okay.
Like, I don't know.
All right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So you don't recall saying that she went into the situation with strength and that the situation in the last couple of months had gotten bad since Jason joined the group. You don't remember?
Absolutely not. That doesn't even sound like my words.
Okay.
I don't know.
I got a bad feeling about Jason Spillers, people.
I want to talk to you about Chloe's access to money. Did at some point she transfer you $65,000?
60.
$60,000? And
Mhm.
when did that happen?
I asked her to put that money, to take it out of her account so Brian could no longer have any way of holding onto it or getting a hold of it. And I asked her to put it in another account because I wanted her and Hannah to start figuring something out as far as getting away.
Okay. Do you recall when that was?
Hannah and Chloe it had to have been in November.
Okay. So you said you wanted her to take it out of her account.
It was after she got Hannah back from when Brian took him.
Okay. Was that when Hannah and her came to stay with you for a few days?
Yes,
And so at that time she had access to her own bank account that had over $60,000 in it?
Yes, because she went to the bank and showed her ID, wrote a check, and she transferred it over to our account.
Okay, so Chloe transferred $60,000 to your account.
Mhm.
All right. And did she, to your knowledge at that time, have any, withdraw any cash?
I believe she had some, when she left North Carolina, she had $1,000 on her,
When she
if
left?
I remember correctly.
Okay. And so she transferred you the money. She
Oh,
had-
no, I do remember. I'm sorry. We went to the ATM when we left North Carolina and she pulled out that money. So she would have cash on her while she was at my house or just for an emergency or anything she needed to use it for.
Okay, so she had debit cards, checks, and access to that account with all the money in it.
Well, she had a debit card, yes.
Okay, all right. So she transferred you $60,000 and she withdrew $1,000 cash for herself?
If I remember correctly, yes.
Okay, and then after that, she chose to go with Brian to look at some property in
She,
Knoxville?
yeah, it was, so after she transferred me the money, a few days later, he showed up, picked her up, picked Hannah up, and she wanted Eric and I to go with them, and we just couldn't do it.
Okay. And
But I look back at that now as a cry for help as far as asking her father and I to go, because she asked us a couple of different times to make sure, that she wanted us to go with them.
okay. And your statement before was that she went back with Brian because she had to go, she was trying to get back to Hannah, correct? Was that your testimony before?
At the Thanksgiving time when she made that video, yes.
Okay. And
I heard some of the conversations that on her end when she was talking with him.
okay. And even after Hannah was dead, her continued pursuit of Mr. Benjamin and her relationship, you'd agree that at that point he couldn't hold the baby over her, right?
Absolutely,
Because Hannah was deceased.
absolutely.
And after she transferred you that $60,000 and she was arrested for killing Hannah, isn't it true that she reached out to you and accused you of stealing her money and wanted you to give the money back to Brian?
Yes,
And she told you repeatedly, that's my money.
yes.
Okay.
I didn't want the money. It was for her.
Okay. And you told her, Chloe, if you
Yeah.
continue to make these choices, you're going to lose your entire family.
Yes,
And at that time, she chastised you for speaking ill of Brian, correct?
most likely, yes.
Okay. And she still wanted to be with him and still loved him even after she killed Hannah.
Yes.
Um,
It was that hold he had on her.
okay. You indicated that you spoke to Detective Cruz in this case. How much do you know about the actual evidence and investigation in this case?
I prefer not to know.
Okay.
I
You've
really don't want to know.
all right. You've intentionally not reviewed any of the evidence. Is that
No, I have no, my husband and I do not want to know.
okay?
I don't
And
want
you,
to see pictures. I don't want to know.
and is it fair to say that you have not reviewed any of Chloe's statements to law enforcement
No.
or the doctors? Okay. So is it fair to say that this jury probably knows more about the facts
Absolutely.
and evidence than you?
Absolutely.
And you obviously love Chloe. She's your only daughter, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And you understand that this jury was selected because they are neutral and unbiased, right?
Mhm.
And you'd agree that they are less biased and more neutral than you.
I mean, I would assume so. I would hope so.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Any redirect?
Yes. Ms. Driver, are you here today just for Chloe? Are you here for your granddaughter as well?
I'm here for both.
Looking back on this whole scenario, well, let me rephrase that. Every day, you think about this case, correct?
Every day I think about both of them.
And you continue to live with a lot of regret, correct?
Absolutely.
And then looking back on everything, do you wish you could have done more?
Absolutely.
Have you had the opportunity to replay all this stuff in your head and try to figure out different ways that you could have done more?
Yes.
Do you feel like you could have done more?
Yes.
Think you should have done more?
Absolutely.
So you're not absolving anybody here of personal responsibility, correct? You're here to give your perspective on what you saw your daughter endure, correct?
Yes.
All right, and that's you understand the position that we are all in, correct? And that you never ever thought your daughter would harm herself or her daughter, correct?
No.
And everything that you saw was Chloe being a loving and caring mother.
She did love Hannah.
And it was clear to you, as you saw her from November 26th up until December 20th, that you saw physical changes in
Yes.
her appearance. I'm sorry, yes?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And you also saw,
I'm going to object to the leading nature of these questions. This is for witness.
you also saw, sure, Your Honor. You also saw signs of visible emotional and mental distress, correct?
Absolutely.
All right, and those are reflected in those pictures that I showed you, correct? And are you here today to persuade the jury one way or another?
No, I mean, I'm ready to accept whatever comes of this.
And you understand that, you know, you're not here to try to help Chloe in any particular way, correct? You're just here to give your version of what
Yes.
happened and you observed.
Yes,
All right, and it's clearly affected you tremendously, correct?
absolutely.
Your entire family, is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
All right, I have no further questions, thank you.
Any further cross-examination? All right, you can step down. Thank you, ma'am.
Before you sit down, I'm going to have you raise your right hand, okay? Do you swear the information and testimony you're about to give this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, you can have a seat. Can you tell the court who you are and spell your last name for the record, please?
Sandra Torres, Torres.
Okay, and where do you currently live, city and state?
Anderson, South Carolina.
Okay, all right, and you understand what you're here for today, correct?
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna talk about an incident that occurred in on November 25th of 2020, correct?
Uh-huh.
All right, so you have to say yes or no
Yes,
because she's
okay,
recording.
yes, sorry.
That's okay. You don't know Chloe Driver prior to that date, correct? All right, so let's talk about what happened in November of 2020. You, at that point in time, were living where?
In Fairview,
Okay, and where's
North
that?
Carolina,
Okay, where's that in relation to Asheville? What'd you guess?
like 10 minutes from each other.
Okay, all right, so tell us what you saw on November 25th of 2020.
Well, I was driving down the road to go get some lunch, and I seen these two guys chasing a young girl. So they were right in the middle of the, like on the side of the road. I made a U-turn, came back. I wanted to see if she was okay because, I mean, she was running from them. And then they had got a hold of her and was dragging her back to the apartments that were right there.
Okay, was this a pretty busy intersection or area?
It's a 2-lane, so it's very small.
Okay.
It's busy usually at first thing in the morning, afternoon, school time, and then in the evenings.
But you were just driving down the road on your way to get lunch that day.
I was just cutting down that little road to go over to the Biltmore area to get lunch.
Okay. Is the young lady you saw running that day present, sitting over there?
I believe so. I mean, it all happened so fast.
And you said she was being chased by 2 men.
Yes.
Okay. And you remember what those men looked like,
Oh,
correct?
yes.
All right. Can you describe what they look like?
Well, one of them, in my opinion, looks like Marilyn Manson.
Okay.
And the other one was just a tall, blonde-headed guy. I mean,
Which one was chasing Miss Driver?
both.
Both of them.
Yes.
Do you recall which one actually physically grabbed her?
Well, they both were like on the side of her, like bringing her back to, because I had pulled over into the apartments there, and she had both of them on the side.
Based on what you had seen driving down the road, that created some level of concern for you, correct?
Oh, yes, because I made a U-turn.
Okay, and then you came back and saw them struggling over her?
Yes,
Okay, and there was still traffic in the area, correct?
yes.
All right, do you recall Miss Driver's appearance that day? Like did you notice any emotions or anything that she was exhibiting?
She was very upset. She was yelling at me to help her child, that these people were kidnapping her. And, you know, that's why I stood and waited. And then I called the law, 911.
Okay, so you called 911?
Yes. I did.
Okay, and you, I think you talked about where you moved your,
Yeah, so where I was parked at, I had actually backed up because they were bringing her back towards the apartment. So I just parked in front of this row of cars,
Okay.
not knowing whose they were. I was just trying to, but I was still in my vehicle at that time. So,
And you saw them struggling over her, correct?
yeah, both of them, yes,
All right.
struggling over her. And then she approached my vehicle and then, what's his name? Benjamin? The dark-headed gentleman is the one that grabbed her again,
Okay,
right in front of she was standing at my doorway.
okay. And you recall her yelling certain things to you?
Yeah, help me. They're trying to kidnap. They got my daughter.
Okay,
Don't leave me. Call my mom.
Okay.
Call my parents. And she tried to give me the phone number.
okay. And you recall that specifically?
Yes.
Okay. And what were Mr. Ben Michael and Mr. Spillers doing in response to that? Do you recall?
Just they grabbed her and got her, trying to get her back in the house, and then she came back out of the house.
Okay, so she got back out of the house?
Yes.
Okay, and then what did she do next?
Come running back towards my vehicle. I had, like I said, called 911 already, and I was just waiting for the police to show up.
Okay, and what did you do with your vehicle?
It was still parked
Okay.
in front of the apartment there, which, I mean, I didn't know that was the apartment she was going to go to, but I was just parked in front of someone's apartment and had vehicles blocked in.
So you saw her being physically taken back into that apartment?
Yes,
Okay,
I
and-
actually take it in there. And then Benjamin's the one that yelled and said, she's having a panic attack.
Could you believe?
She's having a panic attack. Was that because you forced her into the sensory deprivation chamber? Or perhaps she didn't want to drink your urine? Or perhaps you were doping her up with a drug cocktail? I'm telling you, we all had Jason Spillers pegged before this woman ever testified. We all had a feeling about the dude. We were so right.
That at that
No,
time?
because I know people that have had panic attacks. She was yelling for help and to help her child.
All right, so you had already called 911?
Yes.
And you were still waiting for them to come?
Yes.
All right, and then what happened after she came out of that
So
apartment?
when she came out of the apartment, he come after her, Benjamin, or
Okay.
whatever his name is. So he came after her, grabbed her, and at that point was trying to put her into the vehicle, his vehicle, which I had blocked in, which I didn't know that. And she was fighting him off, yelling, screaming, fighting. And then here come another lady out of the house who had a baby.
Okay, and where did that lady go with the baby?
She was trying to get in the vehicle as they were trying to put her in the vehicle, and she was trying to grab her baby. So then now they're tug of warring with the baby. So I got out of my vehicle. At that
great.
point.
And what did you do?
I went over, stuck my hand in the window and tried to grab the keys out of the ignition.
Did it seem like it was taking forever for law enforcement to show
Oh,
up?
definitely.
Okay.
Because it's like, okay, where are they? What's going on?
Did you get the impression that Ms. Driver in any way, shape, or form wanted to get into that vehicle with
No.
him? Okay, was she still yelling at that time?
Yes,
Okay, do you recall what she was saying?
just help me, help my baby. Don't let them take me. Call my
Oh my
parents.
God, it's
All
so
right,
horrible.
And so you tried to keep them from, well, your car had already blocked them in to a degree, correct?
Yes,
All right, and you weren't able, were you able to get those keys?
no.
Okay, and so what did Mr. Ben Michael do?
They got her in the vehicle, the other lady got in the vehicle, and then he was in the driver's seat, trying to maneuver the vehicle.
Crazy people.
Okay.
baby.
And what happened to you as a result of him trying to do that?
So when he was trying to back up a little, back up, he ended up hitting me with his vehicle on my knee.
And you were injured because of that? Or had
Oh, I
a bruise?
had a bruise and a cut. And then at that point, he had maneuvered the vehicle enough. He hit the car next to him, which was Peggy's car,
He hit Peggy's car.
hit Peggy's car,
Okay.
went over an embankment that had plants and flowers and things, went over that and then was gone.
Oh my
Were you
God.
concerned for Ms. Driver and the baby at that point?
Yeah, I believe I called 911 again, saying that they had took off with her and the baby. And then Peggy was still there and Jason was still.
At any point in time, did you ever punch Peggy?
No, she came around the vehicle and told me, you don't know what you've done. You don't know what kind of trouble you've caused. And I was like, well, I didn't know what to say, but she was up in my face, like right here. I did push her back.
But you never punched her
Oh,
or
no.
anything? Okay,
No.
did you ever brandish a weapon?
Who?
You, did you ever brandish a gun or a weapon at any?
Oh,
of
no,
them?
I don't even believe in guns or, no.
All right, so if Mr. Spiller said that you were threatening him with a gun, that's not true.
Never. There would be no way.
All right, and so what do you recall happening after Mr. McMichael's car left?
Okay, so he was gone. There was a little white car there. Peggy had gotten in the car, and then Jason came around my vehicle yelling and screaming at me, and then boom, hit me right in the face.
Okay. And
Down I went.
okay, and what do you remember next?
I don't know if I passed out or not. I think I was in shock. And then just standing there, I think I was in so much shock.
Okay.
I was just standing there still waiting for
The
the police to show up.
Okay, and that white car left.
They both got in there and was gone.
Okay, and by both you mean Mr. Spillers and
And Peggy,
Peggy?
yes.
Okay, all right, so it's your testimony that Peggy got close enough to you and was yelling at you, accusing you of
Yes.
inserting yourself in someone else's business, I guess?
She just said, you don't know what kind of trouble you've caused now. And I didn't know what you meant by that, but
Okay.
I
So if Mr. Spillers told this jury that you punched Peggy a couple different times, that's not true?
no, that is not true.
Were you ever arrested or charged with anything related to this incident?
No,
And Mr. Spillers and Miss, or Peggy, she goes by a couple different last names, left the scene?
yes, they were gone.
Okay, and ultimately you gave a police report that day, correct?
Yes, I ended up, the fire truck came, the ambulance came, the police came, they took my information. There was 2 of the witnesses involved that seen everything that took place. And they asked if I wanted medical. I said I was, because my eye was already all red inside and my nose was bleeding. And so I said, well, can you call the ambulance was there? But I told them that I was not going to go with them because they wanted me to leave my brand new vehicle right there in the parking lot.
Okay. All right, I'm going to show you some exhibits that have been marked defense 21, 22, 23, and 24. All right, so we're going to talk about that one. Okay, so can you identify what defense 21 is, please?
Okay, so that is me right after, and I was sitting in my car, and that's when I was talking with the paramedics about what they wanted to do. But I just sat down back in my vehicle.
Okay. And that's from the date of the incident,
Yes.
correct? All right, so we're going to move to admit 21 through 24,
Mhm.
judge, and then publish to the jury. Any objection? All right, so this is the picture from November the 25th, correct?
This would be the next day, yes.
If the date on the picture from your phone is from the 25th, the day of, does that refresh your recollection?
Okay, so that might have been that evening when I went home and showered and
Okay, all right.
everything then.
Wait, you're the one that took these pictures or have
Oh,
these
yes.
pictures? Okay. Were these pictures provided to law enforcement?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right.
And the judge in the case.
All right. This is going to be this is our next exhibit. Can you tell us what that picture is?
That's just, I just got out of the shower, so I can tell that. Just
How the injury,
the injury to my eye, my
Okay.
first black eye.
all right, and do you recall where Mr. Spiller specifically hit you?
Just boom, right in the whole, I mean, I didn't even see it coming. I wasn't expecting it. And so he just got me right in the side of the face.
Okay, and it was one punch that took you to the ground?
One punch.
Okay, all right. Next one. Is that the one I have in front of you? The other one you have in front of you? Right there. Okay, all right, so this is from November 27th, and again, that's the
The next day.
next day, okay. What kind of medical care did you have to receive for this?
Well, so I stopped. I left the scene, drove
My
myself
God.
because they wanted to leave my vehicle there, and they wouldn't move my vehicle, and I didn't feel safe to have my vehicle sitting there.
This poor woman. Wow, look how swollen. Look at the bottom lower part of her face. See how it's disfigured? My God. Oh, Jason, he's got away with telling tales, doesn't he? His version of reality just doesn't quite match up with the photographs.
So I stopped. I left the scene, drove myself because they wanted to leave my vehicle there, and they wouldn't move my vehicle, and I didn't feel safe to have my vehicle sitting there. So I ended up leaving, went to urgent care right around the corner to have them look, and they told me this was an incident that I needed to go to the hospital for. So they actually went to Mission Hospital, and they got me in so quick. And they took x-rays of the face, and he had broken my eye socket. And he had my, what is that called? Orbit?
Orbital bone?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so basically he had broken everything in this side of my face. And he gave me, pain pills if I needed them for the pain, and ice.
Okay.
And then I had to follow up a couple different times with a bone specialist to see if I needed surgery.
Okay, did you end up needing surgery?
No.
Okay, all right, and I'm gonna show you the next one, and then obviously this is on November the 30th, so again, just the progression of the
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
injury. So you're, in this one, you can see the bruise to your
It,
jaw.
it was the whole thing. He only hit me one time.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then it ended up bruising all. And then, yeah.
And Mr. Spillers previously testified about this particular incident. You immediately made this report to law enforcement, correct?
Oh, yes.
All right, and they took your report and ended up taking warrants for the individuals in this
Yes,
case,
for
correct?
Peggy, because she was right up in my face. I mean, like, for assault. And then, of course, Jason
Mhm.
for assault, and Benjamin because he hit me with his vehicle.
Okay.
And as far as I know, they haven't even been served to this still.
Okay, and you were never charged with anything, correct?
Oh, no.
All right, and it's your testimony today that you never brandished a weapon or assaulted Peggy
No.
in whatsoever. You're not a drug user, correct?
No.
Okay, and you weren't drunk or out of your mind on this
Oh, no,
particular
no.
day too?
I am, whenever any of us girls go out, I am the designated driver because I do not drink.
Okay.
And I just never have.
So Mr. Spiller, your case with Mr. Spillers has been resolved, correct?
Yes, we finally got him. He was in California on charges out there. They finally brought him back here. And we finally did court, I guess, maybe 6 months ago.
Okay, all right, and
He
you were,
pleaded guilty.
he pled guilty?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you didn't have to testify in a trial
No,
or anything else like that?
nothing.
Okay. Did anybody in this particular case, aside from myself and Mr. Kessler, contact you about what happened on the 25th of November?
No.
Okay, you don't recall, you never spoke to anybody from the Canton Police Department or from the District Attorney's Office, correct?
Okay, not for what happened that day, but then, like I said, I didn't know anyone. So
Okay, so you didn't know any of these people
No,
leading up to that?
I still didn't know nothing for probably the first week.
Okay.
And then I found out about Jason, living 5 minutes from me, and
Okay, so you, because you didn't know any of these people, you weren't necessarily able to provide law enforcement on the 25th with their names or anything like that?
nothing.
You were just able to give them information related to the vehicles that they were driving,
Right.
correct? All
I
right.
took pictures and had tag numbers.
Okay. And in your mind, what you saw that day, did you believe that Ms. Driver was in distress
Oh, yes,
and that she was being chased by these individuals?
and kidnapped, yes.
Okay. And you just felt like you needed to intervene or help this young lady?
Yeah, I just, two men chasing a woman, and it's just in my nature. I don't know. I mean, it's a valuable lesson that I learned the hard way. But I do it again? Yes.
I have no
Sweet
further
lady.
questions, Ms. Witness.
Very, very sweet lady.
Cross-examination.
Lady, you have earned a place in
Step down.
heaven
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
sure. Wow, that is so sad. So sad. So sad.
All right, we are going to take a recess at this time. We're going to be in recess until, we will say 11 o'clock. So leave us your
This is the woman that Jason said was drunk and screaming like a crazy person. He completely lied. He completely altered reality. She's such a tiny little thing, isn't she? She was living in hell. She was living in hell with these two men. Absolutely just a nightmare.
in Oregon, and then in 2017 I moved to Georgia and started working with Forensic Specialty Group.
When you worked with Forensic Specialty Group, can you describe the kind of things that you were contracted to do?
Sure. Similar to my work in Oregon, I would get referrals to do psychological evaluations of people who were somehow involved with the law
Yeah, look
often
completely
criminal
different,
cases.
Harley.
So the referral would be a
Didn't
question
look
of
like
are they competent to stand trial, or are they not guilty by reason of insanity? I also did civil cases, doing a psychological evaluation if someone was involved. Let's say they, were involved in an accident and there was some trauma, things like that.
And what do you do now?
Well, at this second, I'm practicing forensic psychology because I'm here. But in about 2022, I wanted a break from the forensic side of my practice. So I stopped taking new referrals and built up my therapy practice. I also always had a small therapy practice since 2001. So I wanted to pivot. So I started building up my therapy practice. So right now I'm just doing therapy.
Okay. And can you tell us, where did you go to undergraduate school?
Did my undergraduate work at Occidental College. It's a liberal arts college in Los Angeles, California.
Okay. And what kind of degree did you get?
I got a bachelor's in political science.
Okay. And what year was that?
Oh my gosh, 1990.
99 or 90?
Bachelor's was 90.
Okay. All right. Perfect. That's my mistake writing. And then what did you do after that?
I went to graduate school at Kent State University in Ohio.
Wow.
And well, I started in 93. So from 90 to 93, I was in my early 20s.
So you went to Kent State University?
Yeah, and got my PhD in clinical psychology and graduated in 1999.
Okay. And then what did you do after that?
When you graduate with a PhD, you can't practice yet. You actually have to get supervised postdoctoral hours in order to get a license. And once you have your license, you can practice. So I did my postdoc in forensic psychology, also in Ohio, where I went to graduate school.
Okay. And that was Kent State University as well?
It wasn't. It was the Summit County Courthouse Psychodiagnostic Clinic in Akron, Ohio.
But you received your Psi doctorate from?
Oh, my PhD I received from Kent State
But you
University.
did your postdoc work at the Summit Clinic?
Yeah, I did my postdoc work in Akron, which is like 20 minutes from Kent.
Do you currently hold any licenses or certifications?
I'm licensed in psychology in Georgia and North Carolina. And then I have a certification called PsyPact, which. do you want me to
Oh, I
describe
have
it?
that.
It's not-
Sure.
I'm
it's
a
not
SciPac
particularly relevant
provider.
here, but states have, 40 of the 50 states have this agreement where if you're a licensed psychologist in one of those states, you can practice online therapy with clients in any of those other PsyPact states. So I have a PsyPact credential, which means that I can do online therapy with someone who lives in another PsyPact state. So I have clients who live in like Minnesota and Utah.
Telehealth type thing?
Right,
Okay,
right.
all right. So
Yeah, I got that certification and I love it.
even though you may live in another state, you can work with clients in another state, it's just kind of a reciprocity type thing?
Exactly. Yeah, it was something that it's existed long before the pandemic, just to make interjurisdictional telehealth more accessible to people. But it has kind of caught on since the pandemic. I think it went from like 20.
I have, Justice Jane. Yeah. I had maybe 3-5 years where I was doing court ordered evaluations and would testify as expert witness. And then also I've testified quite a bit as a fact witness for certain clients, certain patients that may have had some legal issue happening.
20-something states had passed those laws, and now it's 40 because there's just more of a need.
So let's talk a little bit about your professional experience. I'm going to test your memory from going back into the 90s.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us what your first job in psychology was as a trainee?
I don't have my CV in front of me.
Would you like me to?
With my license or before I got licensed?
Before you got licensed.
Before I got licensed, I had my postdoc, and then I moved to Oregon because my husband at the time was also getting his PhD in psychology, and he was doing his internship in Oregon. So moved to Oregon, and I wasn't licensed yet in Oregon. So until I got licensed, I worked at a community mental health center, and I worked in their older adult services. I supervised a locked unit of a nursing home for people who had serious, severe mental illnesses, medical problems that required a nursing home level of care. And I also did assessments of older adults in the community where I would drive to their homes and do psychological assessments for older adults who didn't have reliable transportation, and some therapy that way too. And once I got my license that was in about 2000. And then once I got my license in 2001, I joined, do you want me to just keep going about my
Sure.
career? Okay.
Yeah.
I joined a private practice called Wildwood Psychiatric Resource Center. Actually, when I joined it, it was called Women's Psychiatric Resource Center, but they changed their name at some point because they were serving everybody. And that was a group private practice of psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers who, it was a traditional like office with therapy offices, and we saw therapy clients. And then in addition to that, I also started building a forensic practice in Oregon. So,
All right, so how many years overall have you been doing forensic evaluations?
including my postdoc since 1999. So is that 25 years? As a licensed psychologist, not as a supervised postdoc, 23 years.
Are you currently a member of any professional associations?
I'm not. I'm usually a member of like the state association, like Georgia Psychological Association and on the American side, and I let them lapse because I just never use them. I use a separate liability insurance and everything, so I just kind of let them lapse.
But you still maintain your license and certification in the state of Georgia?
Yes, yeah, the license is required to practice. Also, my husband's a psychologist and he's a member, and so I get all the publications and stuff. So I know I should be a member.
The licenses are governed by each state. It is a law. You're governed by the law of that state. SIPAC is a little bit different. SIPAC allows you to practice interjurisdictionally with participating states. And I believe now, she said 40, but I thought that there were 42 states that you could use your SIPAC license. So yeah, you have to be licensed to practice, because that your license is not through your professional organization. Your license is the state where you're practicing is certifying that you've been tested and found to be, knowledgeable, sane, skillful.
That's fine. Tell me about some of the additional education or trainings that you received with psychology.
To maintain your license, like a lot of professions, you have to do continuing education to renew your license. And so the continuing education that I've done over the years has been mostly forensic and some therapy. So I've, again, I don't have my CD in front of me, but there's an association called the American Association of Forensic Psychology that, in my opinion, they do the best continuing education in forensic psychology. So I've been to their workshops all over, like they'll hold them in different cities, and I'll travel to a city just to do the workshops because they're really valuable. So.
Okay, since you have been licensed, approximately how many overall psychological evaluations do you think you've completed?
That I don't know. It's in the hundreds. I don't know if it's in the thousands. Like if I do
In the
2 a week,
hundreds, you
that's 100
got to
a
have
year.
at least 5,000.
20 years. Yeah, hundreds.
All right, approximately how many competency to stand trial evaluations do you think you've completed?
Hundreds.
Okay. What about criminal responsibility evaluations?
Not as many, because it's not as common of a referral question. Competency evaluations are the most common referral question. So, I mean, over 100. Yeah.
All right, how many times do you think you've testified in any type of court proceeding?
I don't know how many times in anything, including like civil and
Sure.
family court and everything. Oh, dozens.
Does it still make you nervous?
She does,
A
Nancy.
little bit.
Okay.
Not as much. In the beginning of my career, it felt like a really big deal, and now it just feels like part of my job.
Gotcha. Okay. And
That's
when
'cause
you
it is
are
part of
being
your
hired for these forensic evaluations, what is the purpose of those evaluations? What do you think your role is in being the evaluator?
My role is to answer the referral question. So if it's a referral question of, was this person competent? Is this person currently competent to stand trial? I'm doing a psychological evaluation to render an opinion about whether they understand what's going on in court right now. My role is to educate the trier of fact, which is you all, about mental illness and whatever like relevant diagnoses and stuff.
Okay, so essentially you're not being hired to be anybody's particular advocate, correct? Your job is to conduct the evaluation and offer your opinion.
Right. Yeah, that's an important distinction with,
You provide statement of fact.
it doesn't matter what side hires me in terms of, I do the same evaluation.
You just have to
And,
state the facts
yeah. It just,
and use objective data.
there's an evaluation I do to answer a question. I'm not hired to like help someone win a case. I'm hired to give my professional opinion.
Thank you, madam.
At this time, I would move to tender Dr. Ballard as an expert in the fields of clinical and forensic psychology.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right.
All right, so this jury has previously heard Dr. Garrett testify, so I'm going to ask some follow-up questions about forensic psychological evaluations
Sure.
in general. Okay, so what I think you've already touched on it, but what is the purpose of that particular evaluation?
Of an NGRI, of a not guilty by reason of insanity evaluation?
Yes, or competency. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the purpose of those are different. So should I
You
talk
can
about
touch on both of
Yes,
those,
or
because
both.
that's part of what you do, so.
Yeah. I didn't do a competency evaluation in this case. But the purpose.
That was
of
Dr.
competency
Garrett.
Is to figure out if the defendant is currently, their mental status currently, if they can work with their attorney, understand the charges against them, assist in their defense. There are forensic assessment instruments that have been developed to help us to do that. They're not required. You can just do a really in-depth interview. Sometimes it's really clear that someone's not competent to stand trial. Like if they come in to talk to you and they're really psychotic and don't even, know who you are and are really out of touch with reality, it's pretty clear that they can't be competent to stand trial. Other times it's not as clear because they might understand that they're charged with something and they understand that there's a court proceeding and who what a jury is and what a judge is. But they might have, underlying delusions and stuff that would affect their ability to like rationally understand the trial. So the purpose of the evaluation is just to assist the court in figuring out if this person is competent to stand trial. And then with a sanity, I'm just, it's mental status at the time of the offense is the phrase, or NGRI, not guilty by reason of insanity. And that looks more not at how the person's doing right now at the time of the trial. It doesn't look at that really at all. It looks at what their mental health and mental status was at the time of the offense to understand better if there were mental health issues going on when the alleged crime occurred. And so the evaluation will rely always or almost always partly on an interview with the defendant, but not only on that. That's one piece of information, but there are lots of pieces of information to take into account, like witness statements, police records, medical records, interviews with family members. I'm trying to just get a whole picture of what the mental health was of the defendant when the alleged crime happened.
Generally speaking, how do you come to be involved in a criminal type case?
Like practically speaking?
Yeah, I mean, so we have already heard from Dr. Garrett, and she's employed by the Department of Behavioral
Yeah.
Health. So, based on where you work, how
Okay.
do you become involved? in
Yeah,
it?
I've become involved. Someone had an attorney contacts forensic specialty group. Someone calls them back. It's either the office manager, or when we don't have an office manager, it's Kevin, the owner. And the attorney says, I need an evaluation for a client of mine, and they chat, and it gets assigned to one of the psychologists who works in the practice. There's not a particular like rhyme or reason necessarily to who gets what case. Sometimes it's as simple as like, this is in Cherokee County, and at the time that we received this referral, I lived in Cherokee County, so it might have just been like, it'll be easier for Bobby, like Dr. Ballard, I go by Bobby a lot, to get to the Cherokee County Jail. So it's we're all like qualified to do an insanity evaluation. So I was, this showed up on my calendar.
And you, based on just the nature of that practice, you are primarily hired by defense, correct?
Yeah, things work differently in different states. Like when I was at that court clinic in my postdoc in Ohio, all forensic evaluations, whether they came from the prosecution or the defense or the judge, just went to this clinic that I worked in. And so, a lot of times, I would know who had sent the referral, but I didn't pay a lot of attention because it didn't matter. And then in Oregon
I like
and in
her.
Georgia, when the state hires an expert, they usually just
I love the fact that she said she didn't pay very much attention to who it is that is requesting the referral because it doesn't matter. And what she's referring to is if you're hired to evaluate and give a professional opinion on a person, it doesn't matter who wants you to make that. It's between you and the client, or not the client, but the patient, the target. And you have to give an honest, accurate, valid assessment. And your conceptualization, your determination should be backed up by data that you can defend in a court of law. You should be just speaking all fact. Even if it doesn't work for the DA or the defense attorney's not happy, you as a professional, you just state the findings and stand firm with your ethics protecting you.
Use someone who works at DB, I always get the initials wrong.
DBHDD.
DBHDD, thank you. Because I think it's more efficient because they're a state employee and they're on salary and it's, yeah. And so I think the state just in Oregon, I can only speak to the states I've worked in, Oregon and Georgia. The states just don't hire private practice persons, or so rarely that like our phone just doesn't get calls from the state for evaluations. So it's the defense who
All right,
needs people, hires people in private practice. Yeah.
Okay, so based on just how the roles are kind of set up here
Yeah.
in Georgia, that the primary contracting people with that group tends to be defense attorneys.
Yeah, and it's different even criminal versus non-criminal. Like I did civil work and I was hired by the plaintiff and defense, all the time because it wasn't set up that way in the civil court the way it was in criminal. And same with I did parental capacity evaluations and I would get hired by the state, which was
Absolutely
CHS,
true,
or
Zelda.
CHS.
Who will
And by
ever forget
private attorneys who are
Alice
representing
Violet
defense who were
LaViolette?
So yeah, when it's possible, both sides hire.
Alice
us,
with a
and
trip.
It just doesn't happen with the way that the system is set up.
But I understand your testimony is that you've done evaluations for governmental agencies as well.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and in federal court too, it was set up differently. So I've done some some federal criminal evaluations. I worked on the state side and on the defense side. So.
Do you recall up until this date how much the defense has paid you for your work?
So far, the defense or the state indigent defense, the state has paid me for whatever this 2021 evaluation was. I don't recall how much it was, but it was however many hours I spent on the evaluation in 2021. And then there'll be a second invoice for whatever time I'm here today for this trial.
So if you were paid $2,500 for your initial work, does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. That's about 10 hours.
Okay, and then so what you are here for today is obviously your testimony, which you will be paid based on your actual work involved in that and your testimony.
Yeah, whatever hours I spend on this and some travel expenses because I've since moved to North Carolina.
Does that have any effect on why you're here today?
What, the move?
No, ma'am.
Oh.
You haven't been promised a certain particular amount of money for your testimony, correct?
Correct. No,
Just
I'm paid for time, not for like an opinion.
Okay, thank you. So you were assigned this, I think you said it appeared on your calendar.
Yeah.
And then can you tell us a little bit about the steps you took when you first received this case?
Yeah. I saw that it was on my calendar. I don't remember if I either called you or emailed you to find out about the case and to let you know I was the one who'd be doing it and to get records to review before I went to evaluate Chloe and also to let you know when I could schedule to see her. And then at some point I would get the records. It was all like online. There weren't any hard paper records. It was all like Dropbox, electronic records. I don't remember the question.
That's okay. So the things you did. So your first
Yeah.
steps were reaching out to contact me to kind of find out what the nature of the question was?
Right.
Okay.
right.
And I think you've already told us that the request wasn't for a competency evaluation, correct? Do you remember approximately when in 2021 you first received this referral or do you remember what month it was?
I don't. It was probably in February of 2021, maybe January or February. I saw her first in late March, and just knowing that my schedule, I usually had to kind of schedule things a little ways out. At the latest, it would have been the beginning of March.
Okay, so but it appears on your calendar, you start doing your investigation, you
Yeah.
schedule, and then you set that time frame out when you're going to go and meet with her.
Yeah,
But leading up to that, you're doing all these things in the background to prepare for that, correct?
reading whatever records that I have access to at that point, and and scheduling with the jail to do an evaluation.
At that particular point in time, do you recall what sources of information you had available? I know you said it was a Dropbox, so that probably meant it was a lot of,
I don't remember what parts of the records were Dropbox and what wasn't, and exactly how much I had. I know at the bare minimum before I went to see her, I would have had like the indictment and the initial police reports. I don't remember if I had more than that before I went to see her. I would have had just enough to know kind of the basics of the case and what the charges were.
so you receiving things like the police reports or police videos or that kind of thing
Yeah,
is
discovery.
discovery. So you had that available to you prior to going out.
Yes.
Okay. And do you specifically recall what you may have reviewed prior to that or going out there?
Before seeing her, I would have reviewed whatever I had at that point, but I don't remember exactly what I had.
And what is the reason for reviewing those things prior to going out to see Ms. Driver? What are you trying to get an understanding of?
Trying to get to generate theories, as many theories as possible, generate hypotheses to test when I saw her. Some common theories when doing a forensic evaluation are, this person might have a mental illness. This person might not have a mental illness. This person might be attempting to fake a mental illness. They're just different theories to test. So I'm just,
So you would have already in your mind kind of had some things that you were going to go out and look for when you met with Ms. Driver at the jail.
right.
Okay. And you indicated that you went down there the end of March of 2021. Do you recall specifically what day that was?
The 29th.
Okay. And do you recall on that day how long you spent with her?
Not exactly, it was at least a couple hours.
Okay. All right. And when you, and then you went out again a second time?
Yes,
Okay. And do you recall the date of that?
June 12th.
All right. And do you recall how long you were out there that particular time?
Again, I don't, but it was at least a couple of hours.
Let's talk about the steps of your evaluation process with Ms. Driver, okay?
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you generally start these particular evaluations with the defendant?
I start by talking about, by obtaining informed consent. And what that means is reviewing with her kind of the nature and purpose of the evaluation and letting her know what the nature of our evaluation relationship is, because it's sometimes people hear that, you're a psychologist and they think that you're their therapist. So it's important in a forensic evaluation to clarify that this isn't a doctor-patient relationship. There are limits to confidentiality. So I let her know that because I had been hired by her defense counsel, that I would share with her defense attorneys anything, that I learned, but that if I wrote up a report that was shared with the court, that it would be shared with the whole court, shared with everything, so that anything she talked about might end up being things that I would write about or testify about. I let her know her participation is not voluntary. She's not required to participate. And she was just told that she could consult with her attorney at any time and give someone an opportunity to ask questions about all of that and see if they agree. And there's a written form and they sign it. And so that's the beginning of the evaluation, is kind of setting the parameters for what my role is.
Do you recall what her general appearance was when you met with her at the end of March of 2021?
Let me refresh my memory. The only picture I'd seen of her before I met her was a booking photo. And when she came into the room, I didn't recognize her. I thought they might have brought me the wrong person, but it turned out that she had, the booking photo, looked really thin and she gained some weight. It'd been about 3 months she'd been in jail and she gained some weight in jail. So, so she looked healthy. She looked, pretty. She was dressed in standard jail attire. There's nothing really extraordinary about her hair or anything. She just looked kind of normal.
Do you recall if she was medicated at that time?
At the time, although I'm not sure if she was taking it, but at the time she was prescribed Prozac, which is an antidepressant, and Zyprexa, which is an antipsychotic.
At any point during that initial step of your about informed consent or anything, did you ever provide Ms. Driver with what the legal definition of insanity was?
No, when I talk about like the nature and purpose of the evaluation, I'm really broad. I don't even really vary it between different types of evaluation. I say it something like, I'm here to find out if there are issues around your mental health that are relevant to your case. Like, it's pretty general.
Did she seem to indicate that she had any understanding of what that legal definition was based on your conversations with her?
No,
Did you ever get a sense in your interview with Ms. Driver that she was answering your questions in a specific way or to try to achieve a particular result?
no.
What was one of the, I think what you've already talked about, one of the first things you're going to do is background information with the
Yeah.
defendant. Can you tell us about what some of the background information that you obtained about Ms. Driver that you thought was relevant to your inquiry?
Sure. She said that she had been kind of a hard to handle kid. That hard to handle was her words, and that she did okay in school. She didn't have any like learning problems or anything, but that she left early because she was like acting out a lot, and she called herself boy crazy. But she said she was, just not going to school and skipping and just hanging out with peers, and had started to experiment with drugs. Her parents, she said that it was hard. She and her parents didn't get along, so they had even agreed to let her live with a boyfriend in another state for a while, but that didn't work out, so she moved back home. So she said, particularly starting around adolescence, that she was kind of unstable. And then she also reported some mental health, and we didn't get there yet, but some mental health things started to crop up around that time too.
And what were those mental health things that she brought up to you?
Mood issues, like depressed mood, and also really energetic, agitated mood, and also a lot of anxiety, some self-harm, like superficially cutting her wrists. She had at least one suicide attempt where she took an overdose of pills in middle school. And she started at about in her mid-teens, she started to have some paranoid ideation, some paranoid feelings around thinking, and also just some delusional thinking, like believing she could hear other people's thoughts, believing that people were conspiring against her.
So that started back in her teens?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. What did she describe to you as about her employment history?
Not a real significant employment history. Let's see if I don't think I even included a section for it.
On page 3? Page 3?
Page 3. She'd reported she'd been with Mr. Joyce since she was 17, and that he prohibited her from working. And in the fall of 2018, he let her get a job, is how she said it, because they didn't have any money. But otherwise, she didn't have an employment history.
Okay. And you also covered medical history and substance abuse history. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you recall regarding the substance abuse history?
She said that she started smoking marijuana when she was 12, and she was doing it initially to help with anxiety. And when she was 16, a boyfriend introduced her to cocaine, and she tried cocaine, but she preferred alcohol and marijuana. She also tried LSD in high school, and I think that was all that she reported to me.
Okay.
Until some oral CBD.
Zelda,
2020.
Chloe was the youngest
months
of
leading up
3
to
siblings, the
charges.
only girl.
Okay. So the only thing
And
that stood
in
out
an
in your mind
intense
was
family.
the stuff that she had previously done in her early teens and that, and then was reported with respect to the CBD?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And let's talk about her relationship history with you. My understanding is that her really primary and only relationship was with Mr. Joyce, correct?
Long term, yes. Before that, from age like 13 to 16, she said she had a lot of boyfriends, but I don't know how, like, they weren't long-term serious relationships. And then when she was 16, she met Mr. Joyce, and when she was 17, she started a relationship with him.
And do you recall the age difference between the two of them?
Yeah, she was 16 and he was 38 when they met, and he approached her at a bus station and was telling her some spiritual things that really she found intriguing because she had been wondering about spirituality, and somehow they exchanged contact information and she, reached out to him later.
What did she tell you about their particular lifestyle and about having multiple wives and how she kind of conceptualized that whole thing?
Yeah, she said she joined him as his wife, even though they weren't legally married, and that she explained to me that he believed in having multiple wives, and the way she said it is that he made it make sense to me. Like he explained it to her in a way that she accepted it. And her part of her her job, it wasn't a paid job, but her job was to try to recruit other women to join them as wives.
And prior to meeting Mr. Joyce, you indicated that she had none of her relationships had been anywhere like that before, correct?
Right.
All right.
Yeah, they'd been with age appropriate people.
And that it was Mr. Joyce who introduced this other lifestyle to her and explained
Yes.
it to,
Yes.
and she specifically told you that the way he explained it just made sense.
He there were a lot of things that he quote unquote taught her. She said he saw his role as leading young women as his wives in this world. It's very confusing. This world of there are 160 something thousand real people, and I guess they were some of them, and they needed to be secluded from society. We're calling this a lifestyle, but actually it was a cult, and he was or is the cult leader, and she was a member.
Okay. So let's talk about what Ms. Driver reported to you in regards to her pregnancy. Can you tell us what you identified as being important with respect to that?
Yeah, she said she got pregnant in early 2019, and that before that, she and the other wives and him were living a nomadic lifestyle and a car or an RV or at friends' houses. And actually that continued even when she was pregnant. But during the pregnancy, it sounds like that was the first time that she was kind of pushing back against any of these things she was being taught by him, because he wouldn't let her get prenatal care. He wouldn't let her go to a hospital. She had one ultrasound apparently, but otherwise no medical care. He did not want her to go to a hospital when she was in labor, but they had to go because her water had broken, but she wasn't progressing. And after she had their daughter, he made her leave against medical advice after 12 hours because the staff at the hospital were talking about calling Child Protective Services because of I don't know exactly why, actually, I can't speak to exactly why.
But they ended up leaving the hospital.
Yeah.
Per her report.
Yeah, he referred to them as a satanic hospital when they left. And she didn't want to because she still felt like she wasn't physically ready, and she still had questions about breastfeeding. And she didn't want to go.
What did she tell you about how Hannah came to be named? Do you recall?
She said that he chose the name Hannah, but then also chose the nickname for Hannah Nimsy, and said that it was short for Nimza Kazina, which I don't know if it's accurate or not, but Ms. Driver started to believe that that long name translated into I'm Sin. They called her Nimsy, I think, more than Hannah.
Okay, and so one of the first things that Ms. Driver indicated to you that kind of raised a little bit of a red flag was associating the nickname Nimsy with I'm Sin.
Yeah, and it was part of a bigger delusional belief system around the idea that she, and by extension her daughter, were sinful because she wasn't legally his wife, and so she was sinning, and that her daughter had been born into sin. And so there was this sort of ongoing different delusions all around that idea that they were sinful, and that at times when she expressed those fears to Mr. Joyce, that he would reinforce them, that they were accurate.
Okay, and can you describe to us what Ms. Driver told you about their overall relationship, like from the beginning to the end?
Yeah. I saw her a few months after the death of her daughter. And she had very mixed feelings. And I don't think she would have reported them as mixed. I think sometimes she felt really positively about him and sometimes she felt really negatively about him. It's kind of one or the other. When she spoke about him positively, she said, he's the smartest person I've ever met. He's amazing. He's gorgeous. He looks like Jesus Christ.
Oh, Lord.
He taught her so many things about how the world works that she didn't know. And he believed he was the Messiah, and she, had believed that too. So all of these sort of really positive feelings she had about him. Also just felt like sometimes he could be really like affectionate and positive towards her, which I found out later is accurate because I listened to a lot of recorded phone calls that they had in jail, and that sometimes he could be like, really sweet. And then when she was in the other headspace, she said, I talk to people now and they say it sounded like a cult. And I think, I think maybe it wasn't a cult. And they say that he abused me, and maybe it was abuse. I didn't think it was abuse. I think that I deserved it. Or I think that he was teaching me a lesson.
Ah.
So yeah, she was confused.
And it sounds like she had very limited insight into it.
She had limited insight, and it's also kind of a typical insight for an abusive relationship and for like a cult member. There's this theory called trauma bonding, where like emotional bonds grow out of a cycle of abuse. Because even in an abusive relationship, there are periods that are really rewarding, and then there are periods of punishment or abuse. And there's a power imbalance. So the person who doesn't have the power becomes very bonded to this person who sometimes treats them really well. And so by the end of that first time I met with her, one of my theories was that there was this trauma bonding going on.
Okay. Did she describe his relationship to you as controlling and in any way, or were you told what that all entailed?
She described it as controlling. So did lots of other people in witness statements, and I would describe it as controlling and listen to conversations, very controlling. But yeah, she said he controlled her food, he controlled her ability to communicate with others, which is basically she was only allowed to communicate with others if she was trying to recruit a woman to their group, where she could go, when she could have her phone or not, checked her phone, when she could talk to her parents, which sounds like his preference would have been never, but sometimes she could talk to her parents, but he was always there monitoring it. Or if he found out that she contacted them without him knowing, then that was something that she would be punished for. And that's a really typical abusive thing, is to isolate the victim. Yeah, he wouldn't call her Chloe, he called her Kwani. He chose that name and told her that was her name. Yeah, he controlled her email, he controlled her access to social media. And all of this was kind of presented as being for the greater good and for this whatever purpose, greater purpose that they had, that she was to submit to these things because for some bigger purpose.
You indicated that she was talking about some of these things as buying into it because that's what he was selling, or he made it made sense.
Right, yeah. And for a while, it did make sense to her, and she didn't perceive things as abusive. And it was after she became a mother that it was harder for her to buy into everything, because there were things that she wanted to do as a mother that she wasn't allowed to do.
Did she kind of express to you in any way that she was made to feel that those rules or that control was for the purpose of, or that she deserved it?
Yeah, that was actually the word that she used, that she thought she deserved it. She thought, like I said, he reinforced that idea that if anything bad was happening to her, she was being locked in a dark room or told not to move for a long period of time or hit.
How
or
about
anything,
locked in
that
a
it was
dark room
because,
for 2
she
months?
Deserved that.
One of the other areas that you spoke with Ms. Driver about was about CBD use, correct?
Correct.
All right, and what do you recall her report to you about that CBD?
In late 2020, when she was starting to feel more unstable and have more delusions, she wanted to take some CBD because she thought it would help calm her down and feel less anxious. And she felt like 1 small dose a day helped her. But then she said he started giving her big doses 3 times a day. And she said she didn't want that much. And he said she should take it. And he kept giving it to her and standing next to her, making sure that she took it. She felt like it was too much, and then it made her more paranoid. I don't know if it was, or if she was just becoming more paranoid because of her mental illness. I don't know, but regardless, she was involuntarily taking higher doses than she wanted to.
And we talked a little bit about the abuse, but can you kind of explain to you some of the actual incidents of physical abuse that she reported to you and how she viewed that?
Sure. Well, like I said earlier in the relationship, she said that she didn't feel abused earlier in the relationship. She felt like he was helping her out, and that he was doing it for a good purpose. She said he slapped her a couple times earlier in the relationship, but he never left marks on her until October 2020, when he really, she said bashed my face, but punched her in the face. She was upset that, she said she wasn't upset that he punched her or hurt her. She was upset because he did it in front of their daughter and it was upsetting to her. She didn't want her daughter to witness that. So she was already feeling like she deserved to be hit. She was sin and had committed sin and deserved to be punished. But because her daughter saw it and that was upsetting, that was when she wanted to get to her parents' house with her daughter.
So there were, at least in her mind, some signs that she was kind of responsible for all the sin in the world and was taking
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And she would describe him as, didn't describe him as controlling or abusive at first, but described things that were inconsistent with that representation.
I'm sorry.
Sure. So in the beginning of her description of the relationship with him, she did not describe it as abusive or controlling.
She didn't see it as abusive or controlling early on. When she was talking to me about it, she was sometimes talking about it like it had been really great, and sometimes talking about it like, I think he was abusive, or so she was, like I said, sort of 2 minds and really confused and still like kind of bonded to him, but then also questioning it. So.
And without telling me anything about what Mr. Joyce might have said to Ms. Driver that she told to you, were there some of those things that she certainly is actively questioning in that relationship?
Yes.
Did she appear, when you were talking to her about her relationship with Mr. Joyce, really struggle with how that relationship either physically ended or where they were at that particular point in time?
In December?
No,
Or-
when you were meeting with her,
Yeah.
you said that she had been talking both positive and negative. Can you describe did you see that as struggling or how with that?
Yeah, in fact, she told me that she'd had several phone calls while she was in jail with him, but then like people found out and it was stopped. And she said she missed him, but she's confused, is what she told me. And she doesn't know, like she used to think God wanted her to be with him, but now she wasn't sure if God wanted her to be with him. And she said, I think I love him, but I don't know. Like she was confused.
So she was kind of struggling with that physical separation and emotional separation.
Yeah. There's levels here. I mean, if we just look at it as an abusive relationship, she was struggling to get away from someone that she bonded with in an abusive relationship. But then there's the level of this organization, this cult, and that she was struggling with the idea of maybe all that wasn't true. Maybe this greater purpose is, just, not accurate.
Okay. And we'll touch base on, with respect to, we'll go back to those jail phone calls later
Okay.
and how you came to talk about that. Let's talk about the mental status exam that you conducted when you
Sure.
first met with her. Now, you would have done that on both occasions, correct?
Right.
Okay. And the purpose of that is what?
It's to get an idea of how that person is doing, like at that moment, how what their mood is, what their expression, like their expressed emotion is, how their thoughts are working, like are they rational, are they not rational, are they organized or not, just to get a sense of their mental status.
And do you recall anything significant about what you were able to determine about her mood or affect at that time?
Yeah, both times I saw her, her mood and affect were pretty much within normal limits, with some exception. She was like a little bit elevated sometimes. And by elevated, I mean like a little bit energetic or really like quick to like look incredibly joyful. And yeah, just a little like more energy. I understand
Manic,
from like reading
hypomanic, and
other
labile.
reports and reading records that she has been depressed many times. But when I saw her, she didn't seem depressed either time. And that's consistent even with reviewing the jail medical records, that she kind of went in and out of some depression and some mania or hypomania.
And so she reported to you kind of some of those same similar depression type symptoms too, correct? And they were still working on
Yeah.
adjusting her medications and.
Yeah, she said her mood was a little better recently because she'd started on some Prozac, which is an antidepressant. So when I saw her,
Which will
I just
cause
didn't think she was
mania.
depressed because she had started on some medication.
And one of the things you kind of are there to assess is whether or not, or to flush out whether or not they are still potentially experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, correct?
Right.
Okay. And what did you note about that in that particular interview?
Yeah, it's not possible to tell just by looking at someone if they're having auditory or visual hallucinations. Sometimes you kind of can, but you can't know for sure because someone could just be sitting still and hearing and seeing all kinds of things.
I don't know. She kind of walked that back a little bit, but you can definitely, if somebody is having auditory hallucinations, you can see them listening, right? They'll get distracted from the environment and you can see them sort of focusing inward as if they're listening to someone that is speaking directly to them, but it's an internal kind of thing. Visual hallucinations, obviously, you can tell because they're looking at things that are not there. So you can see that. But she did kind of walk that back a little bit once she said it.
She didn't look like she was experiencing any hallucinations, hearing or seeing things. I also just asked directly, and she said she wasn't at that time experiencing anything. She was very talkative, and that's what I mean by that elevated thing. Like she was, talking a little bit fast and a lot of words. She didn't seem paranoid or suspicious. If anything, she was really open.
But that was manic.
There was some pretty significant, like bizarre content in her speech, some magical thinking and some kind of just bizarre.
What was the bizarre content?
Some bizarre ideas and some delusions of reference. So even though she wasn't like disorganized or distressed from any like psychotic, disordered thoughts, she had some sort of delusional thinking. One of them is she said she recently became concerned that she caused COVID because the word COVID starts with C and ends with D and her initials are CD. So that would be an example of a delusion of reference. It has nothing to do with her, but she's like imbued it with some kind of potential meaning and gotten really paranoid that she's hurt a bunch of people, which is again consistent with the previous delusions that she's had. So she was, she appeared pretty stable, but with some, psychotic stuff going on.
Okay, and that was even after she had been incarcerated for some time and is no longer on the CBD, those symptoms were still present?
Right, yeah, this was a few months later.
All right. What were some of the things that you were able to find out from this driver about her history of that paranoia or hallucinations?
She, similar to the COVID thing that she told me about, the CD thing, she said that in the past she's often felt like she's evil and she's the cause of bad things in the world. She also just reported other hallucinations, thinking that bonfires are talking to her, thinking that trees are talking to her, believing that everyone can read everybody's thoughts, and feeling that everyone is against her. Those are all things that she reported experiencing, not at the moment when I saw her, but in the past.
Okay. And then when you are doing your the status examination, you also talked to her in great length of everything that kind of led up to December 8th of 2020, correct?
Right.
All right, what did she describe to you as some of the things that she was enduring during the fall of 2020?
She said fall of 2020, she was getting worse over time. And she was having a lot of paranoid thoughts and a belief that the world hated her. She said that her paranoia was getting worse and worse over time. And the worst period it was the 2 weeks leading up to and including December 8th. She felt like the people that she was staying with, which was Mr. Joyce and his other 2 wives, were all against her, that they hated her. She thought maybe her parents hated her. She was worried people were plotting against her. Yeah, she was just struggling with a lot of, like, there's a word we use, decompensating, but it just means like declining or getting worse. Like she was decompensating over time. She was getting worse.
Okay, and what does it mean to kind of, for somebody with these type of symptoms to express that they have like a heightened sense of awareness to things that are around them? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, it could mean a lot of things, but she told me that she believed she had this heightened awareness of things around her. The way she described it to me is part of that. She could hear other people's thoughts, or she could cause other people, like she was, I'm not even sure how to explain it because it's not rational, but that she was really more like sensitive to other people's thoughts and feelings, and they affected her.
Does that feed into some of those delusions of reference that you're talking about, like thinking that things have a different meaning?
Feeds into delusional reference, that feeds into her problems with having a stable sense of identity. That people with psychotic disorders, people with schizophrenic disorders, really struggle to feel like, to know the boundaries, like where they end and where other people begin. It's very confusing because their thoughts are literally disordered. And so the heightened awareness could relate to this kind of not knowing the boundaries of where she ends and where other people begin, where her responsibility ends. Is it the whole world? Is it, the people, like, all of that was very confusing to her.
Okay. And you'd also discussed with her what happened in November of 2020 with her daughter, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then in the weeks leading up to this, what other things were going on with Miss Driver that you think are notable about, or that contributed to the decompensation of her mental state?
The black eye, when she was hit in October, that was one of the things that like kind of added to decompensating. She had called her parents to get them to pick her and the baby up, but Mr. Joyce took the baby, and so she went to her parents alone and returned because she felt like she'd never see her daughter again if she didn't go back. That was really stressful. She also reported that she wasn't sleeping much at all. She was afraid to eat because she was having delusions around that bad things would happen if she ate. And again, these are those like delusions of reference and the uncertainty about like where she ends and where the world begins. So she had heard Mr. Joyce talking in the past about infinitely shattering if we don't all come together. Or those are the words that she told me. And I don't know what that means, but at any rate, the infinitely shattering kind of got in her head, and she started to worry that if she ate food, she was shattering the food and that might hurt other people. So she wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping for the couple of weeks leading up to December 8th. And we can survive quite a long time without food, but not sleeping will make anyone, even someone without a mental illness, like if you don't sleep for long enough, you will have some psychotic symptoms.
Correct.
So for her not to sleep when she was already psychotic was going to make everything even worse.
Okay. So it's your opinion that also kind of exacerbated the underlying mental health issues?
Yes, yeah, and exacerbated the frequency of the delusions got more and more consistent, and they also got more and more extreme. Like before, it was like I felt like I had to die, and then it was command hallucinations of kill yourself, and then it was, oh, well, it's not just you. Your daughter's a part of you because she got your breast milk, and so you both have to die. And so she was having these like command hallucinations that were getting worse and worse that she was trying to resist.
What is a command hallucination?
A command hallucination is kind of what it sounds like. It's you hear a command telling you to do something. So because you can hear just voices, some people hallucinate voices that you can't even discern what they're saying. It's just like murmuring. You can hear,
The question, how much of these delusions did Spillers put in her head? So I don't know. I don't really, I would say you don't put delusions in people's heads. It's a chemical problem, right? If you become psychotic and you are having delusions and hallucinations of any sensory type, that's a chemical disruption that is creating those experiences. But I wonder, given the set of facts that have been unveiled on the stand related to a modified sensory deprivation chamber, the plurality of marriage, so there were multiple sex partners, the urine drinking, so that's an element of shame, a shame ritual perhaps. This guy, Jason Spillers, his personality, last night we went over and talked about like psychopathic narcissists, which is just someone who has NPD as well as an ASPD, antisocial personality disorder. Characteristic for someone like that would be that they have this superior intellect and that they would not lower themselves to interact with someone else that was less accomplished than they viewed themselves. And so one would think, because Jason Spiller seems so enamored of Z, one would think that Z probably shares a lot of these damaging personality traits that we saw with Jason Spillers. And to me, just knowing what I know about the mind control tactics from the 50s and things like that, it almost occurred to me that maybe they were experimenting with mind control. Maybe they were messing around with the brain chemicals through exposure to sensory deprivation, humiliation, drug cocktails, sex. Something definitely went wrong for this young woman. And I also have to say this, she actually is of the proper age range that schizophrenia would not begin to present itself, but would have coalesced into a full organized schizophrenia. The diagnosis that was given by Dr. Garrett, the prosecution's expert, she gave her the diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. But it also does sound like to me that perhaps bipolar psychosis would have been an appropriate diagnosis. So again, I also talked about there's a lot of parsing out of these individual diagnoses, and the changes from DSM-4 to DSM-5 have sort of reduced the number of people that qualify for a schizoaffective disorder diagnosis. Fewer are now being identified than were identified under DSM-4 because they changed the requirements. But certainly she did seem to be quite manic, but antidepressants can trigger mania. So maybe bipolar with psychotic features, but nonetheless, I think she was being exposed to extreme conditions that then disrupted her chemical levels. And that's where this dramatic presentation of psychosis began to express itself.
Music, you can hear all kinds of things. A command hallucination is someone like you're hearing orders being given to you.
And in this particular case, what were those command hallucinations?
To kill herself and to kill her daughter.
Did she describe the frequency of how much that was occurring?
I mean, she was saying, let me see, I don't want to put words in her mouth. She was saying like that they were getting worse and worse over time. And she felt like, I think she said like all the time, but I don't think that it was 24/7, but I think it was many times a day, like throughout the day.
All right, and she reported to you, well, let's talk about some of these signs or delusions of reference.
Sure.
Can you tell us what Ms. Driver told you that she started associating with these command hallucinations or delusions?
Yeah, she said she started seeing signs telling her to kill herself and her daughter, telling her that she should grab a knife, telling her you need to die. Initially, it was just you need to die. Then it was you and Hannah need to die. And she reported anytime she saw a knife, she thought that was a sign. When people talked about death at all, she thought that was a sign that she was supposed to do that. So pretty neutral, innocuous things like cutlery on a kitchen countertop were interpreted as a sign. She heard news on the TV or a news show about a stabbing, and she felt like that was a sign that she needed to do it. And yeah, just all of these, pretty much, I think whatever would have happened around her, like her delusional mind was turning into signs for this to happen.
Did she express to you after the fact how these delusions made her feel, like, or what she needed, or how she was interpreting them aside from the actual action?
Yeah, they made her feel really anxious and scared. She didn't want to hurt herself or her baby. She was feeling forced, she said, and she was really anxious, and she wanted help.
Do you recall her telling you anything about her attempts to get help?
Yes. She said she was frequently saying that she needed help. I'm losing my mind, I need help. One particular time, on more than one occasion, she said she was afraid she was going to hurt herself or Hannah, and that she needed help, and that she was ignored or given more CDs.
Yeah, she did in fact reach out multiple
and
times. And
one time
people
she
just
said
didn't
she
do anything.
held a knife to her baby's throat in front of Mr. Joyce and the two wives and said something like, "Why shouldn't I do this? I'm afraid I'm going to do this," or some like, "Tell me why this is bad. Tell me why this is wrong." And their response was, he restrained her and told her that he was going to take her to a psych ward. And she said, "Yes, please take me to a psych ward." And he said, "No, because he's against government and medication." And so no
He
further action was taken.
needs
except-
charges
So
against him.
she wanted help. She was afraid that these delusions were getting stronger, and she was afraid that she wasn't safe.
Okay. So leading up to December the 8th, I know that you talked about her continuing to experience these command hallucinations. Do you recall kind of how these initial delusions and delusions by reference increased over time? Do you recall her talking to you about specific visual hallucinations or additional thoughts that she was having?
Well, she was saying that everything, by the 7th and the 8th, everything was pointing to this needing to happen. And there were a lot of confusing delusions going on. There were command hallucinations about, do this, you need to do this. There were delusional beliefs of, I am sin, my daughter is sin, we need to die. There were delusions around that if that didn't happen, other people would suffer. So it wasn't just I'm bad, but that it would hurt other people. She experienced visual hallucinations. Like she said, she saw a bird cage over a woman's head. She said she saw a camera in the corner of a room that wasn't really there. And she just said she started to think, maybe she was evil. and everything she did was bad and evil. And her identity confusion was also part of this, where she let's see. Identity diffusion is this psychological term. It's basically refers to like not having a strong sense of self. And with having a psychotic disorder and having borderline personality disorder, Chloe didn't have a strong sense of self. That's probably why she was vulnerable to being like taken in by Mr. Joyce in the first place. But now she's at an even worse point because she's been declining. Her mental health has been declining. She's really suicidal and psychotic. And I think it was even more confusing for her to know like where she ended and where the other people or the world began. So her idea of killing herself and killing her daughter, in her lucid moments, she saw that it was something she didn't want to do. She was scared it would happen, and really like was afraid of it. But in her delusional moments, it seemed like because there wasn't a clear sense of like where she and her baby ended and where the world began, that it wasn't as it was something she needed to do that was like a good thing to do. That was like the right thing to do. She was very confused.
Okay. And you've previously told us that, this might not have been something that she experienced 24/7, but there's really no way to gauge the amount of time, frequency, or anything like that, correct?
There's no way to gauge it, and typically symptoms aren't like constant. And I say typically, but it's hard for me even to think of people who are psychotic who I've been around. There's a lot of people who don't have little moments of clarity, or who are incapable of goal-directed behavior. So someone might be really psychotic, but they could still, in her case, like change a diaper or
That's true,
drive a car. That's not relevant to her, but I was thinking of someone else. But people can
but that's accurate.
still do things and still be really psychotic.
Okay. What did she specifically tell you about December the 8th and what those delusions continued to be?
She said she was continuing to have delusions around hurting her baby and herself, or killing her baby and herself, and that she was looking for reasons not to do it, but everything she saw, she interpreted as a reason it had to happen. She thought that knives being left out was a message that it needed to happen, so she brought a knife to the room because she thought that it needed to happen. She said she believed she needed to pay for sins that she had committed. She believed that she was that anything that she was guilty of, she passed on to her daughter through breastfeeding. And she said that she told me she had no more will to resist after weeks of resisting.
So she continued, it's based on what she reported to you, she was continuing to kind of have those delusions of reference that were pointing her.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what she told you about when you asked her the question about her behavior that day. Do you recall what she said?
She said as soon as it happened, she regretted it, which didn't surprise me. Even as she was telling the story, she was crying a lot. And this was only a few months after it happened. And she was crying a lot and telling the story. And it also didn't surprise me because leading up to it, sometimes she thought this was something that needed to happen. And sometimes she thought, no, this is wrong. And she was so confused that she was kind of going in and out. And so after it happened, it didn't surprise me that she also at that point thought that it shouldn't have happened.
Is it also fair to say that that could be after having some time to reflect on everything and now being medicated, that's how she might interpret that?
Absolutely.
It's possible, yeah.
And let's talk about, she told you about locking the door and everything else. Can you kind of explain to us how that fits into this kind of in and out sense of what she was experiencing and
Yeah.
confusion?
Yeah, she felt that this needed to happen, and that all the signs had pointed to it needing to happen. And so when she was she had stabbed her daughter, and let's see, I don't remember if someone was knocking on the door or someone was coming, but she locked the door because she hadn't killed herself yet. So she locked the door in order to stab herself more, to make sure that she killed herself.
Okay, so by what she reported to you at that time is that she had already her memory was that she had already stabbed herself and the child prior to locking that door.
Yes.
Okay. And can you kind of explain this in the context of, that thought process and how it fits into her following this command hallucination?
Yeah. Well, like I said, she'd been confused because in moments of clarity, she knew that she didn't want to do this and she was scared. In moments of delusions are beliefs, right? They're false beliefs. So when you're under the impression of a delusion, you believe it to be true. So she believed that this needed to happen. And so she locked the door to help it happen.
Do you know, or do you recall whether or not she had any continued suicidal ideation after she was arrested or released from the hospital?
She did continue, yes. And she reported it, but it's also really documented in the jail records and everything that she continued to feel suicidal. She'd been on suicide watch at least once.
She was
but in and out of
she also
medical in jail
remained
too.
psychotic
Yeah,
in the
she-
jail.
Medication had helped some.
The jailers
but she
noticed that
continues
she was
to
still
struggle.
psychotic.
Okay. And at least those collateral sources is what I'll call them. They also
Yeah.
kind of continue to suggest, did they continue to suggest that she was still having these kind of delusional thought processes?
Yes. In fact, the detective records from interviewing her when she was in the hospital reflect that she was kind of in and out of, she was still psychotic, and she would kind of lapse into, I don't know if she was catatonic or if she was just sort of lapsing into, being non-responsive. And so, yeah, there were clear signs that she was psychotic in the hospital, and in the jail records, when she was admitted, show that she was having delusions and psychotic symptoms. Yeah.
Do you recall if those records kind of indicated that she still had those same delusions about the need to kill herself or believing that she was part of sin, if that was still the continued? Do you recall?
I don't recall. I know that she was suicidal. I don't recall the exact nature of the delusions that, or even if they were written down in the jail records. I don't recall if it just said that she was delusional or if it said what her delusions
What she was
were.
communicating?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. So part of your evaluation included kind of making some sort of diagnostic impression based on the information you had, correct?
Yes.
All right. And what were you able to essentially diagnose her with based on all of the things that you reviewed in this particular case?
I diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and also with borderline personality disorder.
Can you tell us what exactly
That's what I would have done.
schizoaffective disorder bipolar type is? What kind of symptoms and how it manifests?
Sure. Schizoaffective bipolar type is basically schizophrenia plus bipolar disorder.
It only occurs at
It
about
can be diagnosed when someone has the symptoms of
0.1% of the
schizophrenia, but then they
population.
also have the mood disorder part of cyclical mood between mania and depression. The schizophrenic symptoms are hallucinations, delusions, and then the bipolar part is the mood swings and depression or mania.
And here's
What were
what
you also, you talked about borderline personality disorder. What all does that include?
here's what I meant earlier. With schizoaffective disorder, extremes in emotion, extremes in experience, that can trigger the hallucinations and delusions of schizophrenia. And so if these two weirdos were kind of experimenting to see how far they could go with manipulating these young women, they could have actually exacerbated what was already a physical illness for Chloe. I think they've presented a lot of evidence that she's having these symptoms well before she even gave birth to Chloe, before she knew this Z dude. She's apparently seems to have a lot of trauma. And there does also seem to be an organic disorder. And if they are manipulating her like it appears, they really could have turned this into a raging forest fire, a mental illness that she just couldn't come back from.
Entail.
Borderline personality disorder is more of like a lifelong personality, like a personality disorder. And it's characterized by problems managing and regulating emotions and behavior. Like I talked about before, problems like feeling a stable sense of self. Relationships tend to be unstable. There tend to be rapid changes in like one's own self-image and self-identity.
Thank you, Harley.
There can be periods of stress-related psychosis, like loss of contact with reality. And there are often risky, impulsive behaviors, often suicide attempts or threats. And yeah, it's.
What happens typically, or what can happen with people that are diagnosed with both of these particular illnesses if they remain untreated?
Particularly with the schizoaffective bipolar type, remaining untreated is just not advisable.
Okay.
I mean,
It would have been.
there's no
it would
cure
have been-
for it, but the way to manage it is through first off.
This particular diagnosis, untreated or double diagnosis, untreated, would have escalated, likely leading to a point where she would have been, unless she was protected in a protected environment, she would have been wandering the streets, babbling incoherently, not knowing who she was or where she was. I mean, this is a devastating mental psychiatric disorder. So she's physically ill. There's a lot of discussion about, is depression like the common cold, that how much of it is actually physical based and organic disorder versus just someone feeling a certain way. When we're talking about schizoaffective disorder with the bipolar type, this is a true physiological, organic illness. She's sick. She's not telling herself that she's sick. She's not sitting around having cognitive distortions. Oh, my life would be better if. That is not what's happening to her. It's like getting cancer. You don't talk yourself into cancer. It's a cellular problem, right? And so schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, it's an organic problem. The brain is ill. So this, not guilty by reason of insanity for this case, they have a very good chance of winning this case, in my opinion.
Like your first line of defense is medication. Having therapy and a good support system and all those other things, those are really important too, but without the medication, it's just going to be a real struggle for someone to stay in touch with reality.
Yeah, first of all, Calming the Chaos, unlikely that you would see it because, especially since DSM-5. So in DSM-4, the rate of schizoaffective disorder is something like 0.3% of the population. Very, very low. Unlikely for most therapists to ever even meet a patient that has schizoaffective disorder. Once they changed the diagnostics in DSM-5, that 0.3% has now dropped down to 0.1%. It is such a rare and devastating illness. You're probably not going to ever run across it. Now, in terms of people receiving a schizoaffective disorder diagnosis, they likely would have been better. The proper diagnosis would likely have been like major depressive disorder with psychotic features, maybe borderline psychosis. But if, and I think that in this case it's real, I think in this case, she truly is schizoaffective. In this case, it's about the worst mental illness that there is. It really is completely devastating. Even with medication that is being managed by the prison or the jail, meaning she's getting her medication exactly right on time, round the clock, no skipping doses. She's getting enough sleep. She's getting healthy food. In other words, she's in a controlled, protected environment. By all intent purposes, her symptoms should be treated, and yet she is still demonstrating quite a high level of psychosis. This is a very, very, very ill young woman. She has been kept away from drugs of abuse like marijuana and such. That is not what is creating this. She has a physical illness. So this, not guilty by reason of insanity, this one may make it. She may be found not guilty.
Does having these two things exist at the same time, can that lead to any like heightened psychotic symptoms or hallucinations, or if stress is involved, can that make it more
Yeah,
severe?
stress can make it worse. Psychotic symptoms from schizoaffective disorder in the midst of a manic episode are like, a perfect storm.
Okay.
Oh,
Can
it
you
is. It's a
Can you
nightmare.
think of any type of example that could articulate that
Besides this case.
besides this case? Okay, that's fair. All
Thank
right,
you. Oh
let's-
my
let's
goodness.
talk about,
Thank you for
so
saying
you were
it.
able to make those determinations regarding her diagnoses. I know that you and I have talked previously about kind of positive symptoms and negative symptoms
Yeah.
about those particular disorders. Can you tell the jury what that particular
Yeah.
would mean?
Yeah, this is with regards to schizoaffective disorder. In schizophrenic disorders, there are symptoms called positive symptoms and symptoms called negative symptoms. And it doesn't mean positive or good and negative or bad. The positive symptoms mean there's something's there that shouldn't be there. And those are the things like having hallucination, like seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there. Those are positive symptoms because it's the presence of something abnormal that shouldn't be there. Negative symptoms, I haven't talked about as much with Ms. Driver, but those are the lack of like expressed emotion. Someone with schizophrenia, a lot of times there's a deficit of like
Affect.
words or speech. There's a deficit of how expressive their face is. So they might say something really happy or really sad, but kind of with a straight face. It's an absence of expressed emotion or an absence of words. And I didn't witness it with her because she just wasn't in that. She was a little bit more hypomanic when I saw her, but I read in records periods of time when as I was reading it, it made sense of like, that is like indicative of a schizophrenic disorder where she is not talking or not moving or not showing any expression. Like that's just really consistent with, those are negative symptoms of schizophrenia.
Okay. One of the other things I think you, aside from, taking your DSM and evaluating all of this, all of her potential symptoms in this case, what was another thing that you consider to be a crucial factor in determining what her level of functioning was?
All the best people are
It was
Harley.
the
Don't worry
environment she
about
was
it.
living in. If she had been struggling with these mental health symptoms, not in a cult, it wouldn't have been so destabilizing. The relationship with Mr. Joyce is really clearly like a
No, they'll be
coercive,
finished
controlling
in a minute.
relationship where someone uses a pattern of controlling behaviors to create a really unequal
Exactly,
level
Harley.
playing field in the relationship. And it makes it very difficult for someone to leave because they become dependent on that person. They might confuse whether like the abuse, they might be waiting for the rewarding parts of the relationship. And her relationship with him was characterized by such an extreme level of coercive control to the extent that, she was isolated, she was indoctrinated into a belief system. And I understand that like religious beliefs, that's one thing, but a belief system that you deserve to get hit, you deserve to get put in a dark place for days or weeks, like that's abuse. That's abusive. So
Nancy Drew, there is an awful lot of trauma bonding happening with various channels on YouTube, unfortunately.
there's this coercive control relationship between them. And then it wasn't just a relationship between them. It was basically he was functioning as a cult leader and,
And a pimp.
you know, impinging on the individual freedom of action of the members. In a cult, there aren't just members, there's members and there's a leader. And it's not a level playing field. So she, as her mental health deteriorated, she didn't get the help she needed.
So
She got
true,
more
Marlene.
abuse. She got reinforced in her delusions. Yeah, she just, I mean,
What effect do you think in this particular case, the extreme level of that mind control and coercive control played on Miss Driver?
It was huge. Say it. Be confident. You're the expert.
I mean, you could talk about it generally speaking,
Yeah.
but how mind control affects somebody, and then we can get into.
It exacerbated
Yeah.
the
mind control is like a psychological term that talks about to explain like how cult leaders exist, where someone will attempt to distort someone's perception of the world, and it's not like a magical or mystical process. It's actually just a set of pretty well understood psychological processes for controlling people
That's
and
right.
manipulating them.
There's books written
It
about
usually
it.
involves like putting them in a place where they're isolated, where they have to conform, where they have to comply.
Use sex and
where,
drugs.
They have to identify with the group in order to get their needs met.
Take their name
So
away from them.
that was that and the context of being in a cult and the context of being in a relationship with a controlling, coercive person was just a combination of extreme mental and behavioral manipulation.
So just to be clear, so the delusions that Ms. Driver was suffering from in the days leading up to December 8th, those weren't just delusions based on these ideological or religious beliefs, correct?
Right. In fact, the delusions she was having that she was so scared of weren't anything that she was taught in this group. They were delusions. Yeah, they were just delusions that she was having.
Okay. And with respect to Ms. Driver specifically, like what overall life circumstances about her did you feel kind of made her even more vulnerable to what was going on
Yeah.
with the mind control and everything else?
Yeah. Usually people who end up joining a cult have some kind of hunger for knowledge and guidance and leadership, and also hunger for like an ideology and for help defining their identity. It's often people who are in late adolescence and they're just struggling. That's when like we form our identities, or at least one of the formative times for our identity is late adolescence. And that is a really common age for people to join cults. So she was vulnerable.
She
in
did,
those ways
Nancy.
before she even met him.
And
how
and
does that
everything could have been
vulnerability play
dramatically
into
different if somebody had taken time to help her.
Pre-existing mental health things that were already going
Yeah,
on.
she already was having mental health issues. She already had trouble regulating her feelings. She had trouble with reality testing and having psychotic symptoms. And then in the cult, they became even more impaired. And they weren't, instead of getting help with it, she was, like I said, they were reinforced or they were ignored.
Hell, they
What
were
were,
giving
what
her
were some of
drugs.
those things that kind of
Making
compounded
it
all of that,
worse.
that specifically related to Ms. Driver?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to her own mental health struggles, she, because of this group and because of him, she was dealing with extreme isolation, emotional and physical abuse.
Me too, Nancy.
Her
Don't help
mental
me
health
by
and medical
giving
care
me any
withheld.
trauma.
Her food and sleep in the weeks leading up to December 8th were affected. And then involuntary administration of CBD instead of actual mental health treatment.
Yeah. And
Right,
what
so
are we really
in this
sure that
particular
was
case,
just CBD?
leading up to December 8th, after you reviewed all of these materials and everything, were you able to ascertain whether or not you believe that she was in the throes of this kind of psychotic episode and
She was
command
definitely.
hallucinations?
Doesn't really matter, Jesse, I'm saying.
Is it in
This
the
is
events leading up
expert
to-
witness. What are you objecting to?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
Sure. In the events
can't
leading up to
object to an
December 8th,
expert
based on
witness.
everything that you reviewed, were you able to make a determination as to what kind of episode Ms. Driver was experiencing at that particular time?
Yes, not just based on my interview with her, but based on reviewing all of the different sources of information.
Including the police
I'm confident
report.
that she was in the throes of a very severe psychotic episode in the days leading up to December 8th.
Okay. And that's
And to
based
be
on all the things you were just
clear-
telling us about the delusions, the command hallucinations.
To be clear, this is an important point I've seen on one of the LawTube channels. She did not lock the door and then attack the child. That's misstated. The way that it reads is that she killed the child, right? And then she heard someone coming and she was going to kill herself. She had already stabbed herself a couple of times and she was still alive. So she locked the door so she could finish killing herself. So that changes things in terms of her ability for planning, and somehow that would suggest that she knew right from wrong. It didn't have anything to do with knowing right from wrong. She did this as an act of contrition to God, that her sin had poured out into the baby, and that their only hope was that they would be sacrificed, freed from their sinfulness. So this misstating something of small fact can really change the whole calculus of the problem.
Hallucinations, delusions by reference?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Lack of sleep, all of that combined?
yes. She was just incredibly delusional and confused.
And all of we talked about several types of delusions, but all of these delusions kind of centered around the idea that she needed to kill herself.
Yes,
And I think you were talking about her
Absolutely.
inability based
chaos.
on that time frame.
No doubt about it. This is this is a strong parallel to what happened to Andrea Yates. Andrea Yates too was under an incredible amount of stress, religious control. She and her husband had been watching this YouTube preacher. He was a sicko, and they basically moved. How many kids do they have? They have 5 kids, I think. Moved her into a little camper. I don't mean like a big, pretty RV, a tiny little camper, 5 babies. She's pregnant. She doesn't sleep. And same exact kind of thing happened. She went into full blown meltdown. So it's very, very, very similar cases.
And to distinguish where she ended and someone else began.
right.
And that kind of applied to all the things around her, correct?
Right. Yeah, she struggled with, like I said, her identity and knowing where she ended and where the rest of the world began.
And I think you talked about the specific, that she kind of associated, or one of those delusions included her associating breastfeeding with Hannah.
Right. Yeah. Her identity and figuring out where she ended and other people began was longstanding and something she struggled with even before she was a mother. But being bonded with her daughter made that an even more kind of ripe relationship for her to be confused about where she ended and where her daughter began, particularly like breastfeeding, because there's just this little grain of truth that they're sharing something, and that her delusions could kind of pick up and run away with, that then they were, one or blended. Yeah, that's identity.
Question, Jules, can you develop psychotic symptoms with uncontrolled OCD? More likely, Maureen, that you would have OCD symptoms with psychosis. So depends on what age is the person, Maureen. If the person is younger, let's say between 16 and 19, they could be prodromal schizophrenia, which can carry a high level of anxiety, and OCD symptoms develop as a result of anxiety. The OCD, the compulsions are acting out control in a situation where they feel like they have no control. So if the person's younger, more likely the OCD is in reaction to the psychosis. It will be very interesting if Chloe testifies, Angelique. Yep, very interesting.
Like fusion is the term.
And I think you were talking about that kind of, based on all of the resources that you had available to you, you believe that created those periods of confusion, correct?
Right.
All right. Let's talk about, after you reviewed everything, you have no reason to believe that she didn't suffer from these symptoms leading up to December 8th, correct?
Correct.
And that's not just based on Ms. Driver's self-report, correct?
Absolutely.
There were other things that you considered, including things that had been given to you through the state of Georgia, correct? All right. Let's talk about, you ended up issuing an amended report in this case, correct?
Yes.
All right. And do you recall the date of that amended report?
Let me look. It's not so much an amended report as an amendment to the report, where I wanted to replace one paragraph with another paragraph. It's dated May 4th of 2022.
Okay.
So almost a year after my first report.
Okay. So you had written your first report, and in that first report, you included, just like other practitioners do, that, you can revise, add to.
Right. At the end of every report, there's this paragraph that's at the end of, it's just a cut and paste thing. It says that the opinions expressed in this report are subject to modification if I get additional information, or I reserve the right to express additional opinions that I believe are consistent if I decide it's appropriate. So it's this disclaimer that this report is like everything that I know up to this point, but I reserve the right to change it if something happens. Yeah.
And
So-
can you give us some examples of some things that might happen along the way to cause you to reconsider, the findings that you might have made in an earlier report?
Yeah. In some cases, it's that new records become available, that when I read them, it changes some important aspect of my opinion, like it would change my conclusions. That wasn't the case here. What happened here is I finished the report and I was just kind of like, going about my business. But part of my business is I talk a lot about not guilty by reason of insanity with other forensic psychologists, like in consultation and stuff, and get continuing education about it. So what happened was a development in my thinking around not guilty by reason of insanity that I wanted to not reverse anything, but like tweak something.
Okay. And at any point in time prior to you issuing that report, did any member of Chloe's family or contact you and ask you to make that modification?
No.
Did anybody from my office or Mr. Kessler's office ever ask you to make any type of amendments to your report?
No, it was super out of the blue. I think I emailed you one day and was like, I need to write a little, paragraph that I want to add.
Okay. Are you aware of what the dates of the other evaluations were in this particular case?
I don't remember, but they were 2023 and 2024. I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's okay. But you're confident, and what's reflected on that amendment report was that yours was done May the 4th of 2022.
Yes.
Okay. So we've heard previous testimony from Dr. Garrett that hers were done after you had done that amendment, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. With respect to that amendment, you wanted to describe the idea of confusion or how that, how she resisted those delusions, correct?
Right.
Okay. And you were able, upon your reflection and everything else in totality of circumstances, you believe that there was some degree of confusion in her thought process in the days leading up to this event?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about a couple of things that that I assume that the state's going to try to talk to you about. So we'll talk about it first, okay?
Can I
All
not
right,
talk about the amendment anymore? Or what it was?
Well, we might come back to
Sorry,
that.
okay.
Okay, so you talked about in this particular case the idea about we talked about going to the kitchen and getting a knife and to the common observer, that might appear to be something that might have been done in kind of a deliberate or planned manner. Can you explain in this particular case how you perceive, based on your evidence that you've reviewed, her delusion played into that particular action?
She'd been experiencing these signs for weeks. And the more time went on, the more signs she saw that the
I'll say this, sipping on. I have noticed that there are certain, some people, let me put it this way. There are some people that every single case, if the person has been arrested and they're standing trial, they're just like, they're guilty. I don't need to hear any evidence. They're just guilty. Guilty, 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 which is where my channel name comes from, allegedly innocent. It's really frightening that there are so many people that enjoy true crime, don't stop and take time to listen, to really understand what's happening. Because if we start putting 100% faith in government officials, we run a real risk of being victimized by that very powerful government. So even our government officials still need to be held to the limitations of the law. We're a nation of laws. We should be required to follow them. All people judged equally, not, some people are special and they get a little more leeway. Shouldn't be that way. We should all be bound to the law of the land. And I personally think there are some situations where there are people that are not guilty. And y'all know who I think is not guilty.
this needed to happen. So I think, I don't remember exactly how you.
Oh,
phrased the
that's
question.
true,
Sorry.
Desired.
Can you
Yeah.
just kind of explain from a psychological perspective how somebody in the throes of that particular type of command, hallucination, or delusion, how that differs, or how that action differs from somebody that might have, had a rational thought process or deliberate intent?
Judge, I objection. If she's going to opine at the time and talk about delusion, that's improper under 7-4. So I object to that. She just wants to say in general, not the defendant in particular. I don't object to that. She cannot give an opinion at the time regarding any delusion or that's from delusion.
It's an act prior to the event that the state has raised.
All right, make that clear in your questions.
Yes, ma'am. The act, you're familiar with the facts of this case,
Yes.
correct? And one of those facts includes the assertion that at some point after Ms. Driver went up to this bedroom, she left that room and went and got a knife.
Oh,
And Judge, that's not objection because she's asking about a specific act at the time, not prior to it. So she's coalescing two different things. I object under 7-4.
All right, well, we have got to recess at this time and take our lunch recess now. So that objection is sustained. And leave us your notepads. You may be in recess until 2:30. Be back upstairs here in the jury room at 2:30. Don't talk to anybody about the case or let them talk to you. And we'll see you back at 2:30. Thank you.
By the way, you heard those instructions, right? don't you talking about the jury, don't you talk to anyone about the case, don't let them talk to you, correct? In the prosecution of Charlie Adelson, one of the witnesses ate lunch with some of the jury members. And that witness actually went on a YouTube channel and told it. So everybody get ready, because Charlie Adelson's getting a new trial. In my opinion. My opinion.
Give some examples of what that might be.
Like I was talking about earlier, someone can be in a delusional state but still change a diaper or drive a car. Yeah.
What about the breastfeeding?
Oh, yeah, breastfeed the baby.
What about walking downstairs and getting a knife?
Yeah, I mean, that's how people act out their delusional compulsions, is that they do things.
And that could be the same way about locking a door as well.
Right.
Okay.
If it's part of a delusional compulsion, they do it. Yeah.
All right.
Did
We've
you
heard some
hear
evidence in
that?
this case about some Google searches. And
Did you hear what she just said? The question that was asked about psychosis developing because you have OCD. She just said what I said. Usually they have a psychotic process happening, and the OCD develops as a result of intense anxiety.
related to the time frame involved in this case. Can you explain the idea of well, we know that there were different types of searches. You're familiar with those, correct?
Right.
And then I provided those searches, internet searches to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you've had an opportunity to review those, correct?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell me what, in your opinion, is what kind of information you can generate from those type of searches in terms of what kind of state of mind that Ms. Driver was in at the time leading up to these events?
I mean, we can try to infer, like the searches about bus tickets. I would infer that she was trying to escape. The searches, you need to refresh my memory, sorry.
Well, we know that she searched for like items like schizophrenia, how to snap a neck,
Right.
mental institutions,
Okay,
those kind of things. Are you able to make any determination as to what was in her state of mind at the time of the crime based on those previous searches?
No.
Are any of those searches necessarily indicative of anything related to what was in her mind at the time of the crime?
No.
And in your opinion, are those searches indicative, the back and forth of those type of searches, what in your mind does that highlight to you in terms of her delusion and the compulsion?
Really, all I took from those searches was it was another piece of information confirming that she was kind of in and out of being delusional and then not being delusional, or at least believing the delusions and trying to resist the delusions. And when she was trying to resist the delusions, she was searching for a psychiatric hospital because she wanted help, or searching for a bus ticket because she wanted to get away. And when she was more believing the delusions, she would search for, well, how to snap a neck. I don't even know if who that refers to, but other things that she did, like get a knife, would be like when she was believing her delusions.
We know that
I see a bunch of you, well, not a bunch, but I see some discussion in the chat about Andrea Yates. Andrea Yates is a really interesting case, very similar to this one we talked about a few minutes ago. She actually was found guilty by reason of insanity, or not guilty by reason of insanity. She was sentenced to a hospital. And I think was it 2005 that her kids, I think the murders were in 2005. Anyway, she is currently eligible for release from the mental hospital. Every year her case is reviewed again, and Andrea Yates is declining her own release. She is saying, no, don't want out, got to stay where I'm at. It seems like not long ago in Houston, there was a write-up she was in Houston for some reason, and she was not incarcerated. Like, she was walking around free. Maybe she had gone to maybe she had had a medical intervention, but she's back in. She lives at the mental hospital. She seems to be another one like Chloe, who is living with a really serious mental illness, and even the medications don't altogether control it.
That Mr. Iver made several statements to law enforcement and to treating personnel at the Kenneth Stone Hospital after the alleged incident. Some of those statements include, how long is my prison sentence, and discussions about her just wanting to be with Mr. Ben Michael with her child. Are any of those statements indicative one way or another as it pertains to her state of mind at the time?
Maureen, 32 years old, major depressive disorder with diagnosis OCD. She may be having psychotic symptoms. She may have major depressive disorder with psychotic symptoms, which that would be a situation where the psychotic symptoms did not rise to a diagnostic level for full-blown schizophrenia or schizophreniform schizoaffective disorder. So that's probably, if there's any psychosis, it's probably coming from the depression.
Time of the crime?
No, this was after the fact when she was in the hospital, still psychotic on pain meds, knowing she had just killed her daughter, feeling suicidal. Also, the statement about just wanting to be with him and their daughter was like one phrase in a whole long statement. And when you put it in the context, like, that was not the whole point of that whole statement. She was talking about being abused and things were better when there was a smaller group. And yeah. So.
But based on that, from a psychological perspective, you can't make any determinations as to what was in her mind at the state of at the time of the crime based on statements she made after the fact.
No, I think if anything, it again shows that her state of mind was fluctuating. And I think it's misguided to presume that anything she said a day later or several days later or something
Absolutely.
is stable, and she was always thinking that way. She was
Absolutely
all over the map.
Yep.
And I believe it was your testimony today that based on the information you received, including jail records and collateral resources, that those delusions continued months after the offense in this case, correct?
Yeah, she was still having delusions when I met with her.
And she was in the
We've also heard testimony in this
situation.
case about hundreds of phone calls to Mr. Ben Michael after she was incarcerated. Can you tell us first you reviewed some of those phone calls, correct?
I did, not all of them. There were too many, but it's several of
Correct.
them.
And how do you explain, from a psychological standpoint, this continued contact in the nature with respect to Chloe Driver?
I explained it in the context that we talked about earlier about trauma bonding, about a cycle of abuse, feeling very connected to him. She'd been with him since she was 17. She had a baby with him. Also, she'd been very controlled by him, so she was used to submitting to him.
And he
So,
was your spiritual leader.
It would have been more surprising if she had just not wanted anything to do with him. That seems like, to someone who's not connected to someone that way, it seems like a no-brainer that she should have just wanted to run as far away from him as possible. But when you're in an abusive relationship like that, it often takes many attempts to get away.
Okay. And what were some of the concerns that you had with respect to the nature of the relationship based on the calls that you listened to?
How extremely controlling he was one concern. For example,
Objection, hearsay.
We've already stipulated to the foundation of the jail calls.
He is remarried.
Hearsay, Your Honor.
I don't know where you're going with this. Y'all obviously know.
I think she's about to say what someone else who's not here to testify said on the phone call. She can't offer her statement because it's party opponent commission rule on David too.
She
These
said
statements
her
that go
witness
directly to
didn't
the
say
state
what
of
she
mind
wants
is
to
the state's
say.
arguing that continued contact is a way to counter any defense that we may have in this particular state. And they factored into Dr. Ballard's analysis of this particular relationship and formulating her opinion.
I don't object to the defendant's statement, but not the other person's statement.
What?
What was,
All right.
What did he say?
I'm sorry.
It goes to our client's state of mind in terms of how those statements affected her.
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to ask that y'all return to the jury room for a few minutes while we take up a matter that we cannot take up in your presence. Don't talk about the case, and we will call you back in as soon as we can.
You can't object to your expert witness. They're the expert. I don't understand what his objection is. She's so little. Look at how tiny she is. She looks like a child standing there, like a teenager. Yeah, does anybody know what the objection is? I don't quite understand.
Phone calls that Ms. Driver had with Mr. Ben Michael. Are we talking about the substance of those calls now? Is that where we're going?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are we talking about any other call to any other individual?
No.
The judge, Ms. Trethway told me which one she's going. I don't object to those particulars as long as she doesn't go into great detail.
I think it will be limited in what he is saying. The point of the question is to affect, basically it's to be what he is telling her to do and how she is responding to that during those jail phone calls. Particularly, just to bring us back to a topic we had last week, he tells her about drinking her own urine in the jail, and for which he ultimately gets her to say that she will do things like that he is telling her to do in those jail calls.
Play the video. Play their audio recordings.
He goes to the level of his control.
You didn't have to testify to that. You got the recording.
Additionally, making her refer to him as daddy and acknowledge in those phone calls in response to things he requests that she do, that I do, daddy, I do.
Gross.
Let me understand the state's position. Mr. Focus, you said you didn't have an objection to either of those two?
As long as it's those two, not other calls, no objection, Your Honor.
Okay, well, I wasn't done yet.
I apologize.
That's okay. The context of the calls where he's directing her to make phone calls to other individuals to ask to obtain the money that is in question.
I'm sorry. I
That's,
apologize.
that's okay.
Questions about the money?
About the money.
back.
Ben Yaman directing her to contact her parents.
Don't object.
And
Just as long as we're not going down in more detail than just that topic. Okay, no objection.
one more.
Good.
Him directing Chloe to be clear about not adopting or accepting any angle or strategy that involves the idea that I was manipulating you. He was talking about Chloe's defense. He directed Chloe to be clear that she was not adopting or accepting any angle or strategy in this case that involves the idea that I was manipulating you. You're not going that route. Be simpler and clearer and tell them it was ideas terrorizing your brain caused a psychotic break.
No objection, Judge. It's just these topics we're talking about.
Yes,
Those
that-
four topics. You're
Wow.
not introducing the calls.
No.
You're just asking this witness.
Why weren't the
They were
why
provided to
wasn't
her as a
C
basis for her-
arrested?
evaluate. in
Some
her- yes.
part of her evaluation. All right. Anything else before we bring the jury back in?
No objection.
All right, let's bring him in.
I'd like to.
Golly, so sad. So sad.
All right, Dr. Ballard, before we took that brief break, we were talking about part of your review in this case involved you reviewing and listening to several phone calls, correct?
Yes.
All right. In this case, we already know that there were hundreds of phone calls. I think you indicated you have not listened to all of them, correct?
Right.
All right, but can you talk about and tell the jury about some of the content of the calls that you listened to and what your concerns were related to those?
Sure. One of the calls I listened to, the content was he was instructing, she was in jail, and he was instructing her to drink her own urine while she was in jail. And that if she felt embarrassed to do this in front of her cellmate, that she should tell her cellmate that her naturopathic doctor told her she needs to drink it or else she'll get sick. And he was saying things like, you need to do this. You can't fight me on this. You need to do this. Do you understand? And she was resistant. And when he was resistant, he said, I was expecting the answer, I do, Daddy, I do. And they kind of went back and forth until she finally said, I do, Daddy. And he said, that's better, or good job, or something like that. And to me, this just reflects how controlling he was and the amount of control he had over her. And,
Go ahead.
and the idea that the only acceptable answer is to completely agree with whatever it is he's saying.
And there were also discussions about money, correct?
Yeah, he told her also to get, it was a big sum, $60,000 from a loan he made her take out, that she needed to tell her parents to give him that money. And she said, what are you gonna use the money for? And he said, why are you questioning me? And she said, because I can know what you want to do with my money. And he said, no. He said, why are you asking me that question? Are you doubting me? She said, I'm starting to doubt you because this, it's a few months into jail. And he went on a long tirade that I didn't document in full, but basically he called her dumb, told her not to talk to her mom anymore, said every time you talk to your mom, you get pear-shaped and stupid. She at one point tried to interrupt and said, and he said, no, there's nothing else with you, you need to change.
Okay. And there were several more phone calls that you listened to regarding that.
Yeah, at one point he told her, it's a little ironic because he told her that under no circumstances was she to represent him as being controlling or manipulative to anyone. They were talking about her defense, and I don't remember his exact words, and I didn't put them in my report, but it was basically like, you will not, represent me that way. You will not do that. And it's like him controlling her to say that he's not controlling. Yeah.
You would agree with me, based on some of the other phone calls that you listened to, that that he was also kind and sweet to her and that kind of thing.
Yeah, even in these same phone calls, when she was completely agreeing with him, she would get very reinforced for that. Or sometimes a phone call would start out just kind of like any relationship, like, hi, sweetie, I miss you, how are you? But the second that she would not be 100% compliant, then there'd be pressure and control until she was compliant again.
He
And
was
then once she was compliant
conditioning
again,
her.
he would say really warm, nice things, or if she'd share something, he'd say, oh, that really makes me happy that you got to, she shared a book she read. And so that makes me really happy that you enjoyed that book. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. He knew how to be kind.
Okay. Did you find it, were you surprised that after she was incarcerated that she continued this contact with him?
No, it's pretty typical in an abusive relationship and in a cult, and so certainly in both, that it's not just a quick separation, but there's a continued connection.
Okay. And you'd agree with me that a jail is not a therapeutic environment, correct?
It is not.
Okay. And that, to the best of your knowledge, the only thing that Ms. Driver was receiving during her incarceration was medication, correct?
Medication, and what they call counseling is short, every few weeks, short little visits, pretty much basically to make sure people are suicidal. So it's not the kind of counseling that will bring about therapeutic change. It's just to
And based,
sorry,
no, that's okay.
to
Go ahead.
see if anyone needs to go to Suicide Watch.
Okay. Based on your professional experience, it didn't surprise you one way or another that she was still communicating with Mr. Ben Michael?
No.
All right. And that you would agree with me that just strictly putting her on medication and not providing the additional therapy or anything else is part of the reason why this continued?
I think so, yeah. In my professional opinion, she would need a lot more treatment to get past this relationship.
So just removing the physical nature of that relationship doesn't necessarily break that bond, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Okay. Based on your interviews with Chloe and any of your collateral sources, was it clear to you that Chloe loved her child?
Yes,
What did she express to you that she never wanted to hurt her child?
yes,
Okay. And that was also kind of corroborated by the additional information that you had to consider in this particular case, correct?
yes. There wasn't any information that suggested that she ever wanted to hurt her child.
And you also had the opportunity to watch Dr. Garrett's testimony,
I
correct?
did.
You had also been given both of her reports that she had done subsequent to yours, correct?
Yes.
All right. You essentially would agree with me that both of you diagnosed her with the same type of disorders, correct?
We did.
Okay, minus the cannabis use one.
Right.
Okay. And, you were able to, you would agree with her when she said that there's, the difference between crazy, mentally ill, and insane, correct?
Right.
All right. Is there anything about Dr. Garrett's reports that you take issue with?
We were pretty much on the same page that Ms. Driver was severely mentally ill and delusional. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about delusions, okay? But going back to that briefly. you've told us that a delusion is a fixed false belief.
Yeah.
Okay, and that it is a fixed false belief that is just not true.
It's not true, and yet someone believes it is true the way that I believe I'm sitting here right now. Yeah.
Okay. And the delusional compulsion is when someone acts upon that false belief, correct?
Right.
Okay. And when someone is acting upon that delusion or false belief, is it because they believe it to be true?
Yes.
Okay. Are they acting on that delusional belief because it is the right thing to do in their mind?
Yeah, in their mind, it's true the same way that
Compulsion, they can't.
I believe it's true that when you ask me a question, I should answer it here, and you guys will hear what I say. Like that, it's that. So that's the right thing for me to do right now, and so I'm doing it. That's acting on a delusional compulsion. It's just doing
Not
what you
that it's
perceive
right
to be
or
true and
wrong.
right.
So the person acting under delusion believes in their mind that that false thing not only is true, but it's the right thing to do
Right.
in their mind.
Right.
Okay. Is it, if someone believes that this false idea or delusion is true, is it possible that they may not understand that that's right or wrong?
Not just possible, but that's kind of the nature of a delusion, is that
Correct.
they believe it to be true. So if I believe it to
You're
be
in
true
an
and right,
altered reality.
I don't think it's wrong.
Altered reality.
If my delusion clears up later, I might see it differently, but in the throes of the delusion, which is the belief, I believe it to be right.
In this particular case, you have testified, along with Dr. Garrett, that Ms. Driver suffered from these delusions, not only in her adolescence, but that they were present in the time leading up to December the 8th of 2020, correct?
Correct.
All right, and you'd agree with me that those delusions by her report and what the resources that you reviewed indicated that those delusions got worse.
Yes,
Okay.
particularly the fall of 2020.
Okay, and what
When Jason Spiller showed up with his potion.
was the lack of medication and treatment over time what kind of exacerbated those delusions, those thoughts and those compulsions?
I mean, part of it is lack of treatment. Treatment would have helped. Part of it was she was living in a really stressful, abusive environment. That would make her mental health decline.
And, over time, based on your review of all the materials, it became clear to you that she resisted those delusions, correct?
Right.
And those compulsions?
Yes, she was scared of them and was afraid that she wouldn't be able to differentiate them from reality unless she got help. So she was trying to get help because she was really afraid about these thoughts she was having that sometimes she believed were true.
May I have a moment?
Ooh.
Any other questions at this time, Dr. Valley? Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Okay, there's still like an hour for this woman to finish testifying. So I've got to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I need to go ahead and end this live. Thank you all for watching with me. I sure appreciate it. It's always fun to watch and discuss it together, right? So I appreciate that. And I hope that you guys get a good night's sleep. And let's see, tomorrow, Tuesday, I might be able to come on tomorrow and do another live like we just were able to do with this particular expert witness. So, yeah, thank you guys. I really, really enjoyed it. I absolutely appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And again, please if you haven't subscribed, I hope that you will. And then hit the thumbs up and good night, sweet salty tea. I hope you guys all sleep well. Night, cinnamon, hot. It's good to see you. Harley, thank you for you and Sipping On and everybody just had some great comments, and you guys make it worth discussing, watching the cases because the discussion is so good. Good night, calm in the chaos. Everybody, I will see you guys tomorrow, okay? Thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Good night.